Can't hear you now.
I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Are you able to hear me?
Too loud now.
Yes, very clearly, but there is a delay. Is there a delay, David? There's a slight delay, Tim.
It's a Bruce Lee one.
What?
Bruce Lee
Bruce.
one.
So there's a slight delay. You talk and then we hear your voice. So don't worry, you just talk normally and we'll just allow us to hear what you're saying. Because there's a slight, 2-second delay, David? Can you hear me saying that, Ian?
I can see you and I can hear you. You're a little bit echoey.
Okay, all right, we'll just work through it because I don't think the audio is brilliant as far as real time. So we'll see how we go. Okay. All right, well, we'll get started, everyone. Welcome. Just get my papers organised. Welcome, everyone, to this Ordinary Council meeting, 23rd of June 2020. Welcome to members of the gallery. We are back in Council Chamber in the Institute. I also welcome people who are viewing this meeting on YouTube. Welcome to whoever's out there in YouTube land. I'd like to firstly acknowledge this land that we meet on tonight is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. I'd also like to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Great Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So welcome everyone. I think we have everyone here. There are no apologies therefore. Are there any motions to grant leave of absence, councillors? I don't see any hands going up. And we have nobody on leave of absence, and we have no one on attendance. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone who's here in person tonight. A few people I've welcomed. We do have Tony Piccolo, MP. Welcome, Tony, back into the chamber again. You might notice the on boards have just been put up, not in your honour, Tony, but in recognition of the history that this town has and that they belong in the chamber. And they are the mayors of Paula from Dodot. There's a few people up there, and then there's quite a lot of history in those, and they've been fully restored. We also have the Kaurna Shield is now up on the opposite wall, and this was commissioned by council as part of the redevelopment of these two buildings and the Civic Centre. That River Red Gum Shield came from Apex Park and was made by Jack Buckskin, a Kaurna man. So there is a scar tree. You can see that scar in Apex Park. If you ever care, go down and have a look. And this came out of discussions around wanting to have the First Nations people and particularly Kaurna people present in this room, if not in person, in spirit, and also assist with good decision making. So it is a strong statement around culture and around the importance of culture in our community. So that's there for everyone to see. It's a marvellous display. I think everyone would agree. So now we move to item 3, which is public open forum. And I don't have anyone listed. Is there anyone, and there's a couple of people that are listed for deputations, and they are Ben Taylor and Sarah Burns, so I'll call you guys up when we get to item 4. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in public open forum? Is somebody putting their hand right up at the back? Is that you, Sam? Do you want to come forward? Hello again. So I'll get you to turn the mic on, Sam. There's a button on the top and you just hold it and then we go green. Oh, it's on? Okay, it's already on. Perhaps if you move it so I can pick up your voice, Sam. Welcome.
Thanks. Great to be back here. So I'm the state coordinator of the Anti-Poverty Network SA, and a while back, Gullah Council passed a motion saying that they would ask the federal government to increase the rate of New Start to at least the Henderson poverty line. And today, we now have a doubling of the rate of New Start because of the coronavirus supplement. So I just wanted to come and say thank you for being one of the 40 plus councils in the country who were ahead of the time and understood the imperative of lifting people out of poverty. And I thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for your advocacy and hard work. And it's good to, I think it's good to get that acknowledgement. So it's fantastic, Sam, that you've come back and, I don't think it's just the council, but it's certainly been a strong advocacy project, hasn't it? And I think without JobKeeper and JobSeeker, I don't know where we'd be at the moment. So any other takers for public open forum? I don't think anyone's putting their hand up, so I'll move to item 4, which is deputations. And firstly, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ben Taylor, Managing Director of Taylor Group Newspapers, and Ben is here to speak about the Bunyip newspaper. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Mayor Redmond. Great to be here and in front of you councillors. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come and speak. And just for those of you that don't know about my past, I'm a 4th generation regional newspaper person. My family purchased the Bunyip in 2003. So the role that regional newspapers play, especially with engaging with all tiers of government, especially local council, is certainly not lost on me. Furthermore, what I'm about to say might not be new to you, but it's great to have the opportunity to be in front of you so you can put a face to the name. And I certainly welcome any of you contacting me if you have any issue with our reporting in general in the Bunyip, and especially with matters relating to council. The Bunyip's role as a newspaper, we would be terribly neglectful and failing in our role if we didn't report on council and all decisions made at council level in general. It's a huge part of a newspaper's role. It's part of the democratic process. It's freedom of speech, it's engagement and having all of the ratepayers be able to see, read, hear what's going on at local government level. So while sometimes it might not be all that pleasurable to see what we publish in the paper, in the Bunyip has a great positive role for the township of Gawler and especially Gawler Council when it advocates for all things for the betterment of the Gawler region. As a voice to lobby state government, federal government for a multitude of things, such as grant funding, infrastructure spending, and the like. The role that we play can be a hugely positive one for Gawler and its ratepayers. I believe there's been some support at council level to perhaps move away from supporting the Bunyip in terms of council's advertising spend with public notices and advertising in general, which is very concerning to me. Obviously, the plight of regional newspapers is pretty well documented of late, and we need all the support that we can get. And I certainly would hope and encourage that the Gawler Council will continue to support the Bunyip by way of its advertising spend and maintaining that at where it has been in the $30,000 to $40,000 range of recent years. It's more important than ever that we get support from the town. Obviously, we're going through difficult times with COVID, but we certainly need that ongoing support from local government. The Bunyip has been around since 1863, and there's no other newspaper that will support and advocate for this region as much as the Bunyip will. If if the voice for Gawler through the Bunyip was lost and it was left to another newspaper, perhaps up the road, look, I would just hate to think when there's competing interests at play, you know, another newspaper will not advocate for this region anywhere near as strongly and powerfully as the Bunyip, which has been around since 1863. So just something to keep in mind, especially when different townships, different regions are competing for grant funding, you know, and road expenditure and health and the like. You know, the Bunyip will serve that purpose better than any other newspaper. Further to that, I mean, a general role of the newspaper is community awareness in all senses, not just government and politics. It brings about a huge sense of community pride, and the newspaper, while circulations are not increasing, but we still have a very significant and very large engagement with our readers and with the ratepayers of Gawler in this region. Things that are very important to the region, such as horse racing, you know, the annual Gawler show, and especially sport on a weekly basis. You know, we're certainly all missing winter sports, especially in the good old footy, but it's those sorts of things that really galvanise the community and give that sense of region, sense of town, and brings everyone together. And that's what the Bunyip has been doing for, as I said, since 1863. It's got a huge awareness, a huge brand following. Look, I'm more than happy to work with council on ways that we can help leverage council's message. We have, as I just said, we still have a very significant and strong readership, around 12,000. Our Facebook following is around 16,000. And when you look further into that, on average, our posts reach 165,000 per week. That's with our 16,000 followers sharing certain comments and certain posts on our site. That's 165,000 per week. So look, I'm more than happy to work with council on ways that we can leverage your message. If council is willing to work with us and certainly continue in the way they have with their previous spend in public notices in print. You know, I certainly hope we can strengthen relationships with Gawler Council, where we do provide a voice to the people of Gawler that's often not received that well by council. By the same token, we provide a very positive voice, as said earlier. Just some examples are back in January this year when we, January 15th edition, we may be a bit too far away to see, but we did a front page story with the $8 million Murray Street upgrade, titled Road to Riches, and then on page 4 and 5, the big 2-page spread on the 2020 vision for Gawler with lots of the projects, or the main projects, and the focus for 2020, with a lovely photo of me written in there. So it's those sorts of things that, you know, very positive things that council are doing that, is part of the role that we serve, you know, on a weekly basis almost. And just more recently, Councillor Shanks, with his request to have a $2.4 million waiver contribution to the Link Road upgrade, published just only a couple of weeks ago. So look, they're the main points that I just wanted to get across. There's more work that we can do in nutting out ways that we can help leverage your message across our broad online reach, which I'm more than happy to discuss in further depth. So, in summary, we're here for the betterment of Gawler, and we certainly need council support going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Councillor Davies and Councillor Koch.
Right, so my question is around online, because that's something that we were discussing was you know, working more online marketing into the way Gawler Council does things. I know that the Bunyip has started a website, but they have posts and they've had a few other things going on. And as you said, the Facebook has a huge reach. I'm just wondering if there are any options that are going to become available for us to to market through Bunyip in an online fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as I said, I haven't put together options or proposals along those lines as yet, but I'm more than happy to work with council on working out a few different alternatives there. It's all about engagement. We already have the engagement. We've got the eyeballs, and we just need that advertising support. As I said earlier, that advertising revenue is being not targeted, but it's dwindling in so many areas, whether it's real estate, advertising, cars, employment. So we are just more and more reliant on local small business advertising and of course local government.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Look, I just want to pick up on some of the things you talked about your Facebook page. You said you have 16,000 followers, 165,000 reach of that many people. In a statement that you made on the when was it, the 20th of May about an issue up in the Riverland, you said that there was the importance of local newspapers, but you said, however, it is not a vehicle for the denigration of those in public office. That was the final sentence of an apology letter that you put into your paper. I mean, I've been to your Facebook page and I've seen a lot of posts that denigrate council staff and councillors, and they've been left up there for long periods of time. So can you just give me an idea of how you moderate your Facebook pages? Because I'm sure the press council wouldn't like it. You can manage letters to the editor, I suppose, and you might get a complaint from the press council, but some of those posts I've seen up on your Facebook page have been there for a long time, and I think they do denigrate councillors and council staff. So any comments?
Sure. Well, it's just one of those things with online media. I can't answer specifically on that. If derogatory comments are left out too long, I'll talk to my editor about that. Certainly raise it with her. But this is the social media and the online world. But more social media has become a necessary evil for newspapers. And there's a different lot of rules for defamation in print as there is to online. And why that is so, God only knows. But people can get away with a lot more online, and I'm not saying that that's why we leave it online, but it all takes resources to monitor it. And we've got very limited resources, especially at the moment, whilst staff are working less than a full week, especially our journalists. So it all comes down to monitoring and keeping on top of those things. But I will address your particular concern with our editor.
Thank you.
Firstly, Ben, thanks for coming. I just had just wanted to reiterate some of the comments you made earlier, just around, again, picking up on the digital platform. I can hear what Councillor Koch is pointing out. I guess we really probably need to measure up the good with the bad on the benefits outweighing pros and cons. So we really need to look at that, and I'm really interested in seeing how that goes. I guess the articles that you print on behalf of us in print media, on a personal level, it'd be really great to see those shared on your Facebook platforms and the paywalls sort of lifted around some of those public interests, because they're in the newspaper to engage, and you have highlighted the 160,000 per week, and Councillor Koch has noted, that might sort of attract some negative comments, but I think the reach is really important there. So I'm really interested in investigating that alongside you and seeing where it takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fine line for us, because obviously the money driver for us that keeps us all in the job is the print product. We can't garner anywhere near enough ad revenue online to pay for one job, let alone the 10 odd that are employed at the Bunyip. So we can't release all of that news, or we've just got to make judgment calls on how much we release and how early we release it, because the print product is paramount to us and our business model.
Thank you, Ben. Come to that matter very shortly, so thank you. I might ask you to take the seat.
Excellent.
I'll leave the mic on and Sarah can make the most of that when she comes up. So thank you, Ben Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Redden. Thanks, councillors.
So next is Sarah Burns, who is talking about playgrounds in Aspire Estate. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, my name's Sarah and this is Neil. He's also a resident of Aspire. So I've sent a letter to council which you should have in front of you. Okay, my ex-husband and I were living and working in the country when we decided to move back to Adelaide and start our own family. Aspire seemed like a dream that promised playgrounds, running tracks, an oval and fitness hub. In 2015, we built our home. This wasn't an investment, this was our forever home, the place to raise our family and be happy. 5 years on, I'm stressed, regretful and sad. Stressed because we're getting nowhere, regretful because of broken promises, and sad because my little girl is only young once and I'll never get their juice back. Sad because despite paying to be able to walk her less than a minute to the neighbourhood playground, we have to get in the car and drive. I'm fed up with working all day, then having to get my toddler organised to be put in the car to attend other parks, when I paid a premium to be close to the park fees, less than a minute's walk from our house. Our neighbourhood park is not age appropriate, is unengaging and dangerous. I should not have to stress over my toddler falling downstairs, running straight into the pond or hurting herself on a dangerous slide. I should not have to say, sorry baby, you can't go on the swing, it's only for the big kids. Yet watch her little knees scrape on the ground in the toddler park, yet still fall backwards because she's not old enough to swim independently. The reality is Aspire residents bought into this development because what was designed, planned, put to council, signed off on by the town ruler and promised. Neil, who is standing beside me, spent an extra $40,000 on his block due to its outlook. His outlook was supposed to be beautiful, large oval with soccer goals, running tracks and fitness hubs. He bought this block in 2017, almost 4 years on, and his house still overlooks dirt and weeds. Neil had followed the progress of the estate in 2013 and relocated his entire family to this beautiful estate for the promises Aspire offered. Before signing on the dotted line in 2015, he was promised by Lancet that these developments were still going ahead. The promises which have been broken have had significant consequences. Neil, who is retired from the army due to post-traumatic stress disorder, has struggled dealing with the stress and financial consequences of building in the Aspire estate. Neil has, with other members of our community, rallied the Lancet communities to complete what they had promised and what council had signed off on. This has involved community meetings with mayor, councillors and local member of parliament Tony Piccolo. In addition to this, the community has arranged and attended public rallies, attended council meetings and written numerous letters to council and had correspondence with Lancet communities. The entire process has caused unnecessary stress to each and every resident. Neil's PTSD has deteriorated and his marriage is a casualty of Aspire. When I reached out to Neil, he'd almost given up on his fight. He told me that the stress he and his family have endured over the last 5 years has led to his marriage breakdown. His house is not worth what it's supposed to be worth because of the disagreement between this council and Lancet communities over the development of a recreational space and delivering the master plan. Neil chose to have a small backyard with artificial turf because his children were supposed to have an oval across the road. This didn't happen and his children are getting older and have nowhere to play or practice their sports. This may seem like something small to council, but it's not to us. We're not asking for anything more than what was promised and what we had paid for in the price of our land and built our homes. What council needs to understand is that we have already paid for these amenities in the value of our land. We're not investors, we're families. The goalposts have been changed halfway through the game and it's not fair, it's not okay. Today we want our local playground upgraded, but ultimately we want what's promised. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just quickly, just to touch on that, what Sarah just said. Essentially, yeah, so I'm a veteran. I was posting between Adelaide and Sydney. As Sarah said, I've been watching Aspire since 2013. I wanted to send my kids to Trinity College because back in 2007, when my oldest child was born, I worked at Defence Recruiting in the city. And I used to go to all the schools, all the universities around Adelaide, basically getting candidates for the Defence Force. Trinity really caught my eye. So I basically bookmarked it as where I wanted to send my kids when I had children. I was in Special Forces in Sydney and I literally had a career changing path with my children and I moved back to Adelaide to send my children to Trinity College and build a house next to that school and have the facilities that Aspire have advertised and still advertise on their artist impressions, and have verbally told me before the contract that everything was going ahead. As Sarah said, the block of land I ended up buying was at least $35,000 to $40,000 over the market value, purely because it was on Greenslade Boulevard, a boulevard of dead trees, and it's now got 1 metre high prickles across the street. That's the native vegetation, native grasslands that the council has said we have to accept as our acceptable play area for the kids to go on. Metre high prickles. Well, I've got a 4-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 13-year-old. 13-year-old is in Junior Premier League soccer. He needs to train. I can't just take him to Para Hills twice a week to go and train. He needs to get out across the street in the grass and play. So does my daughter. They're national members in karate. Okay, they've been around the country representing South Australia in karate. I've got a dojo inside my house to facilitate that. But when it comes to running around out in the open spaces, I'm not going to send them down the footpath next to the main street. Okay, we paid for a spot that should have been there. The 4-year-old doesn't have anywhere to play because the playground isn't appropriate. Again, can't go across the street with his older brother and sister because it's 1 metre high prickles. In the summertime, it's just a dust ball. The block that I paid for was $227,000. The same size block, 200 metres up the street, which I was going to buy, $190,000. The day I rang Luke Biggs from Aspire to purchase that property, he informed me of the one on Greenslade Boulevard because it only just come back on the market. I took it straight away, simply because of its location, what should be its ongoing value, and yet here I am. And so my front yard and its landscaping currently matches the council's recommendation of our reserve, dirt and weeds. And until something changes, it's not good enough. My marriage has been a cost of this, the stresses. I'm on a disability pension. I've got a busted back, busted shoulder, the list goes on, PTSD, whatever. So I'm on a disability pension for the rest of my life. I'm now a single parent of 3 kids 100% of the time. I need to let them run around. I need to have what was promised, what I paid for. And I'm sick of hearing excuses from the developer because the council won't play the game. It's not good enough. It's simple as that.
Thank you, Sarah and Neil. That concludes deputations. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest on any matter? Right, there's 3 hands up on tonight's agenda. So I'll go around the table, Councillor Koch.
Yeah, 11.11, renewal of leases. Do you want to know why?
You can tell us why.
And 11.4 as well.
That can just be noted, and when we get to that item, you can get my attention, that would be great. And fill out the form, you've got that in your hand, that's great. I think there's an online form, isn't there, Chris?
Yeah, I think
It's still not, still in progress? Okay, no problem. Thank you. Now, Councillor Goldstone.
Yes, item 11.1.
Yep, 11.4 and 11.11.
And Councillor Hughes.
11.1 as well.
11.1. Okay. Anybody else? No? Well, I'll just put the hand up. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We'll now move to, there are no petitions. There are no agenda items. Moving to confirmation of the minutes. And we have 3 sets of minutes. I'll go through them one by one. So on item 8, we have the ordinary council meeting on the 26th of May 2020. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hughes, you're happy to move that way. And was that a second, Councillor Sample? Thank you. Any discussion? If not, I'll put that motion, that's for the 26th of May, Chris. We'll just do one at a time. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously, thank you. Moving to the special council meeting on the 3rd of June. Do I have a mover and a seconder? I've got Councillor Hughes happy to move, seconded by Councillor Little, thank you. Any discussion? No, I'll put that motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tooley. Councillor Tooley? You happy to, you wish to ask a question?
Yeah, I want to speak to the motion. Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, yes, I can.
And also, Mayor, were you able to see my votes at the last item?
Yep.
You were?
You clicked yes.
I pressed my my hand button and it didn't seem to activate. I'll just try it again. Okay, it's activated now. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'd like to speak to the minutes of the 3rd of June and express my disgust that my questions without notice are not answered, and that my motions on notice are blocked, and that my questions on notice are blocked, and all of those are asked in the public interest, and yet this administration, I believe, is misusing its powers to discriminate against me, and the administration is choosing to arbitrarily and quite subjectively demonize my motions and my questions by classifying them as being improper. They might be uncomfortable, but they're not improper. And I believe that this is a misuse of power, and our community is being denied the opportunity to even see the questions that I'm asking and the motions that I'm asking. And this needs to stop because it's a breach of the regulations and it's a denial of my rights. And as such, it's impossible for me to vote in favour of these minutes because the very things that I'm trying to ask questions about on behalf of the community are being denied. Motions that I'm trying to put on behalf of the community are being denied. And our community should be outraged that they're not even able to see them. So I would ask that that process is reconsidered, checked legally. I would welcome you checking it with the Ombudsman, and I would be of a strong view that the Ombudsman would not support the practice of this administration in blocking my questions and my motions.
Are there any other speakers on this particular matter, which is the special council meeting of 3rd of June? There be none. I'll put that motion, all those, the mover of the motion, do you wish to close the debate? No, thank you. Put that motion, all those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, it is carried. Thank you. Now moving on to special council meeting 16th June. I did accept a mover and a seconder for those particular minutes. You move Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Goldstone. Any discussion? Councillor Tooley, you've got your hand up. If we can have his mic off, thanks, David. That'd be great. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Redmond. Hello? Can you hear me okay?
There's a delay. Keep talking in and it'll come through quite okay.
Okay. This is June. Mayor Redmond was prepared to accept a motion without notice advisor that completely changed on the 28th of April to a debate on my behaviour rather than a debate about my attendance. As a result, what I believe was a kangaroo court was held where I was vilified and defamed in public by this council, and I was found guilty of repeated and sustained behaviour breaches despite there only ever being one code of conduct complaint raised against me in 6 years. The Town of Gawler administration wasted no time at all in acting on the resolution 2020.04.COU131 and called a special council meeting for the specific purpose of dealing with this and prosecuting it on the 16th of June. Rarely does the council administration ever act so swiftly. I refused to legitimise that resolution by not attending that meeting, and I refused to attend the special council meeting. My questions are, why was it decided to hold that in confidence when I was so publicly attacked? How many thousands of dollars of ratepayers' money have already been spent by the town of Gawler just getting the item ready for the 16th of June? How many more tens of thousands of ratepayer dollars are now going to be spent prosecuting that resolution of Councillor Fraser's even further? And finally, on this issue, instead of following proper process and submitting complaints via the regulated process under the Code of Conduct, elected members and the council administration have chosen this avenue and need to realise also, because the investigation is happening outside of the Code of Conduct and the resolution and regulations, there is no power associated to the conclusion of the investigation. So what this council is doing is following a mean-spirited investigation. When they have not been willing to submit a complaint against me, they're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars of ratepayer money to end up with a conclusion which has no power. I cannot be thrown off council, and there will be no recommendations that they can make which can be held up against me, because the investigation is happening outside of the Code of Conduct and the regulations. Not only should councillors and the administration be ashamed at this waste, but you should realise how you haven't followed correct procedure at all. And if you had any courage, you would apologise to me publicly for what you have done.
Any other discussion on the special council meeting on the 16th of June? Being none. That motion, all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Moving on to business arising from the closed minutes. Any business arising from Councillor Hughes?
Yes, I'm referring to the special council meeting 3rd of June 2020. Councillor Tooley was asked by the chair to apologise to me for a statement that he made, which was incorrect. Ask Councillor Tooley whether he's going to give a yes or no, whether he apologise now and save some money from council ratepayers for a needless investigation. What he said wasn't true. I'd like that apology now.
I believe that was a matter that I had a conflict and that I can't discuss that. When you have a conflict, you don't discuss it at a meeting and remove yourself from the meeting. So I'm actually going to remove myself from the meeting for that matter to be addressed. And either yourself, Councillor Davies, or Councillor Hill take the chair. Thank you. So I'm declaring conflict around that question and removing myself from the meeting that I'm the chair once that has been. Thank you.
So, just to be clear here, is this, so this is for business arising?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right, so would I be able to get some clarification myself on what the procedure is for this kind of thing?
Through the chair, if I can ask, maybe if I can ask Councillor Hughes to provide some further clarification of the nature of the concern that he has.
So it's in the minutes that Councillor Tooley was asked to apologise to me by the chair. In the minutes, it actually says he gave an explanation, but he didn't actually give an apology. So I'd like that apology now. Otherwise, I may take this matter further.
All right, so, let's see. Councillor Tooley, do you wish to respond?
Councillor Davies, I found it very hard to hear what Councillor Hughes was saying. It sounded like he thinks I owe him an apology from the 3rd of June. I remember that you were chairing on that night, Councillor Davies. I remember you asked the administration about a number of points of order that from a couple of councillors. My recollection is, and we could go back to the video actually, my recollection is that you overruled and there was no need for an apology. That's my recollection. And I can't even remember what the item that I was meant to apologise for, but I do recall you ruling, getting some advice from the governance officer, and I do believe that the video record shows that you overruled and we moved on. That's my recollection.
So, as I recall, it did come up subject of asking for an apology. It ended abruptly because we decided to put the motion, which stopped all discussion. But before that, we were in the process of, I had asked you if you were, if you'd like to apologise as he requested.
Councillor Davies, could I ask you to turn on your other microphone? I think there's, because you're very echoey, or speak a bit closer, but you'll have to refresh my memory. What was the point of order that I was meant to apologise for? Can you perhaps speak clearly into the microphone? Or could Councillor Hughes remind me what it was, please?
Yeah, I'll see what we can do about the microphone. I'll just speak closer. Are you able to hear me clearly at the moment? That's probably a no. Let me see. I can try. Sorry, I just need some technical support. Just make sure that echoing is sort of a natural function of a speaker system where your voice is being broadcast out. Sorry, Dan Barrett,
Through the chair, the audio is perfectly fine on Zoom. I've got it connected here through headset and I can hear it perfectly clearly.
Okay, were you able to hear David Barrett?
David was a bit mumbly, but I'm looking at the video here and I can see that what's called the mayor's microphone is muted on the Zoom. So I'm wondering if you were to unmute the mayor's microphone, whether that might make you a bit clearer.
Okay, staff have been shaking their head at me. It seems like that might create a feedback loop or something and get extremely loud.
So through the chair and Councillor Tooley, it's muted because the mayor is not using the computer Zoom microphone. We are using the council chambers microphones that are then plugged into the Zoom system. So that's the only through the chambers microphones. So all elected members need to speak clearly into microphones for this to work.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, if you perhaps, I really don't know what Councillor is on about. My recollection is that he persisted with a point of order on the night. I'd be happy to go back and look at the video, but my recollection is, Councillor Davies, that you moved on. You overruled his point of order and we carried on with whatever that item was. I can't remember what the item was. Maybe refresh my memory.
Do you wish to continue, Councillor Hughes? It doesn't seem like.
Well, Councillor Tooley just approved the minutes of it. Well, he actually voted against them, but it's clearly stated in the minutes that Councillor Tooley was asked by the chair to apologise. There was no apology given. It's in the minutes. There was an explanation said in the minutes, but no apology. So that's what I'm asking for. Councillor Tooley just wants to ignore that in the minutes unfortunately take it further, but I just can't believe that someone who's just read the minutes and gone through the approval process has missed that bit.
Right, so I think that's going to cover it. Councillor Julie is not planning to apologise, so we'll in that case move on and bring back the mayor into the chamber.
Can I actually get that put in? Can I have that actually put in the minutes that Councillor Tully is not apologised?
I imagine that's.
Well, he didn't say it. He did ask him if he was going to apologise or not.
I did ask whether he apologised or not. He's not acknowledging that at all. It is clearly in the minutes that he was asked to apologise. So I'd like it noted in the minutes that Councillor Tully has not.
So, well, I'm sure the minute taker will go through the regular process for this kind of thing. I really don't think we're going to get anywhere going back and forth over whether there was an apology to be made. So, yeah, I'd just like to, in that case, move on and bring back the mayor into the chamber.
Yeah.
Sorry, get the mayor.
Can you hear me, Councillor Davies?
Yeah, we're moving on from this one and bringing the mayor back.
Okay, I'm still, I'm unclear what Councillor Hughes is going on about. I don't know what you're recording in the minutes, but if you could record that I'm having a lot of difficulty hearing him and I don't understand what he's going on about at all. But I'm more than happy if someone wants to put something in an email and send it to me. I'm more than happy to consider it, but I just don't know what he's on about. I'm sorry.
I think there are some connection issues on your end. We have had a little trouble hearing you at some points as well, so it might just be an internet connection issue. We'll see how it goes. Right. Council member reports. There is many council member reports submitted. I've got one. Any other reports? Other members? Okay, so if there aren't any other reports, I'll go through my list of events. We've reduced list of events, but we have been doing some work around promoting the projects that Ben Taylor was talking about, particularly around the swimming pool, the aquatic centre. There's some really exciting stuff happening there. The various discussions that I have with staff. I had a discussion with the President of the New South Wales Local Government Association, Linda Scott, Councillor Linda Scott, the other day, particularly around the fact that nationally local government have lost a seat at COAG, which was quite a left field decision by the federal government, and so there's going to be quite a bit of advocacy around getting a voice for local government nationally. And I think everyone should hopefully advocate and get a very loud national voice, because it is a big loss to that important group. Yeah, so I just put that to you, and I think it'd be good to have that included in the minutes, but we'll need a motion. Councillor, are you happy to
note the elected member reports and include the written report in the minutes. You happy for that? You have been a second, Councillor Koch. Any discussion? Not put that motion. All those in favour of the motion? All those in favour? Everyone needs to vote. Councillor Tilly, you haven't voted. You put your hand up. We put the vote. I'll put the vote. Can you vote? You either vote yes or no. Okay, I'll put that vote again. Councillor Tilly, you've got your hand up. What's the issue?
You can't hear you.
You can't hear me? You can't hear me? Is that right? Okay, I'll put that vote again. We could stay focused. I know it's tricky. If everyone could raise their hands if they're in favour of it. If you could vote, Councillor Tooley, that would be great too. All those against? No, you haven't voted in. David, can you unmute Ian so I can hear what he's saying, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to say to you, I couldn't hear what you've just introduced. I thought we were voting, we're about to go to item 11.1. When you came in, you said something else. What motion?
Elected reports. I'm working down the.
Have you gone backwards?
I'm gone backwards. We've gone to item 10, elected member reports. That's the next item on the agenda.
Okay, all right, sorry, my apologies. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. That's okay. So I'll put that motion that Councillor Little moved. Where's the thank you. And Councillor Koch seconded. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we move on to officers' report on page 5, and I'd like to welcome Trevor White and Mr. Oh, sorry, Councillor Goldstone, you've got like to declare a conflict.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a specific conflict of interest in this matter. Due to being a member of the Council Assessment Panel, we will consider any subsequent land division application.
So you'll be living the room. Thank you. And you filled out your form. Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Yes, I'm a deputy member of the Council Assessment Panel member, so yes, I've also got a perceived interest, but I'll be staying in the room and voting, and if the matter does have to come up when I am on the panel, which may or may not have declare an interest in, don't disclose on the matter there.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Shanks, do you want to declare something?
Yeah, I'm going to do exactly the same, being deputy for the CAP, and I choose to stay in the room. If I am voted on this item as a member of the CAP, then I'll deal with it.
Okay, so you're declaring what type of interest? Percent, and you stay in the room here? Okay, thank you. And you've got your form in front of you. Awesome, thank you. Okay, right. Mr. White, if you'd like to come forward, and Mr. Zweck, thank you. If you could just adjust the microphone, Trevor, if you know how to use it. Thank you.
Mayor Redman and elected council members. Trevor White's my name. I'm a planning consultant, and I also have with me Mr. Peter Zweck, who's the landowner of the application before council this evening. Tonight we're looking at application to vary an existing land management agreement that exists on the subject land identified is allotment 105, Bentley Road at Eulaby, which is a total area of 32.5 hectares. The LMA, in fairness, was a direct result of the 2006 Tiver Land Division, which realigned 12 existing allotments into 7 allotments. In actual fact, the Tiver Land Division, prior to the 2006 Land Division, consisted of 4 contiguous titles. And I think that's an important aspect to consider tonight, that prior to the land management agreement being imposed on the subject land, there were in actual fact 4 separate titles. Also importantly, it's also important to consider that those 4 contiguous titles were used for primary production, and that primary production activity still happens today. The most continuous aspect of the land management agreement results around clause 4.2, which over the last 7 years has been interpreted and challenged on several occasions with different outcomes along the way. Clause 2.4 has 2 limbs to the clause. The first limb, which relates to development of land under section 57.2 of the Development Act 1993, relates to land management agreements. The second limb relates to the preventing the lodgement of an application of development authorisation in relation to land division. In March 2013, Mr. Zweck lodged a development application for land division for the creation of 3 allotments, 1 allotment of 24.5 hectares and 2 allotments of 4 hectares, and subsequently a variation for the existing LMA. A report for the variation was presented to council, and at that time in September 2013, the decision of council was not to support the variation to the land management agreement. However, the land division application still existed, and because of the decision of council not to endorse that variation to the LMA, the land division application was presented to CAP on the 8th of September 2014, where the panel deemed the land division to be hypothetical and declined to consider the application. An appeal was lodged by Mr. Zweck in October 2014 with the ERD court, held that they had no jurisdiction to entertain a legal challenge to the validity of the LMA. Upon the decision of the ERD court, the applicants appealed the decision of the ERD court to the Supreme Court, and where the Supreme Court ruled in favour of the applicant, and there were 4 critical issues decided by the court. The first one being the ERD court did have power to determine the validity of the LMA. The second one was the first limb of clause 2.4, which relates to section 57.2 of the Development Act 1993 was valid. The second limb that prevented the lodgement of the land division was invalid, and that the proposed development was not hypothetical, and that council's CAP should have considered the planning merits of the proposal. The Supreme Court effectively squashed the refusal and remitted the application back to council's DAP for consideration at its regular meeting on the 8th of February 2016. The decision was, again, to refuse the application. This decision was again appealed in the ERD court.
Well, 30 seconds, Trevor, thank you.
And on this occasion, ruled in favour of council. However, it should be noted that because of the Supreme Court ruling, there has never been a supplementary agreement prepared on the back of the court ruling, thus attached to the land as it is now, that prevents any land division being submitted to council.
Thanks, Trevor. Thank you. Okay, that's a presentation from Mr. Trevor White. We have an officer's report here. Councillor Hughes, do you have a question, or do you wish to?
I was happy to move.
Are you wanting to move the opposite's recommendation? Is that what you wish to do? Okay, you have the floor.
Do I need a second first before I start speaking?
You can speak and then I'll ask for a second.
The original LMA was set up to actually protect agricultural land. So what happened was Mr. Tibber, the land management agreement was set up for Mr. Tibber to actually put some rural living blocks together and to actually protect a larger area of 32.5 hectares as cropping land. So that's what the LMA was set up to do. It means that we've got an area, and Councillor Samuels told me this, that grows some amazing crops. It's really good cropping land that produces really good crops. So it's important that this LMA stays in place to actually protect this cropping land. And the other parcels that were set aside by Mr. Tibber are rural living blocks. And then there is some agricultural sort of pursuits, but this cropping 32.5 hectares, as the council report says, is quite an important parcel of land, and it is a sort of parcel that sort of we need to protect and sort of be part of our rural zone. It's something that Joe has been debated in the courts and is seen as very viable agricultural land. It's also seen that fragmenting rural land is not good, and it was actually ruled in the court that there was beneficial understanding of that. So it's also talked about in the council report that it's sort of consistent with what council's rural zone is about, is this area. Mr. Kidd from Insight Ag also in the court sort of stated how good this agricultural land is. I just think it is really important that we continue to have cropping in our suburbs of Gawler. Basically, it keeps our best of town and country. It keeps our division from the northern suburbs. And once we start to fragment valuable cropping land, it'll certainly mean that there'll be less of it and less cropping. It's something that I think is just a key for Gawler to keep that division. Recently, and it's in following a council report, it was one of the statements that came out quite even from a lot of the residents from the Cutler area, how important it is to actually have our rural zone and to have our division from Adelaide. And this land actually is a very important key to that. And that's what the staff and the court has found in previous. So I just think it would jeopardise the overall objective of our rural zone if we do change it to rural living, will fragment our rural land. And I just think so strongly on this matter that I will be calling a division so that I can tell my family and children and even my grandchildren who was responsible for actually fragmenting our rural land. Because I do think that once we start fragmenting our remaining valuable cropping land, that Gawler is just going to become a suburb, not a country town anymore. Which, that division, which is so important, I think it is important that we keep this parcel as a whole.
Do I have a seconder for this motion? You wishing to second?
Yep.
Councillor Koch, do you wish to speak?
Yes. My biggest concern is the fragmentation of productive agricultural land, and in particular, what was said by Mr. Kidd at the ERD court, that it uses, it's good productive land, and that by using good agricultural techniques, you can produce good crops, etc. I think it could be a threat to, if you actually think that this area isn't viable, it's some of the most productive land in our state. You'd almost have to write off the rest of the state. This is prime agricultural land. And even the applicant's advice that he got on page 173 of 774, actually, the agricultural consultant that he actually says that it would probably be converted into lifestyle blocks anyway. So he was under the assumption that's what would happen. So, you know, I'm just concerned that it will cause fragmentation and we will lose that productive area. So I'm supporting this recommendation from the officers. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a mover and a second. I open it up to the floor. You should speak, Councillor Ballard.
Yes. This has been going on for so long. I don't even think that. I don't even know why we're not. Why the officer is recommending it. Is not recommending it. This gentleman's been trying to get this for a long time. I don't think any of what Councillor Hughes and Councillor Koch did stacks up. If it was going to be used as rural prime land, it will be, and it would be, and it's not going to do anything to the area. I think it's going to make it a lot more better and more beautiful. You know, it's only an LMA, which means it was done by someone. It's not a state regulation. It's not a council regulation. It's a land management agreement that was done at the time by somebody. So it's not a state regulation, and it's done. If you couldn't do it, you wouldn't be able to do it. I think you should be able to do it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Not, Councillor Hughes, do you wish to close the vote?
Yeah, it just in closing.
Hang on a minute, we've got a hand up by Councillor Tooley. I'd ask that you get your hand up a bit earlier, Councillor Tooley, before I close the debate. Thank you.
Can I? Yes, I'd like to speak against the motion, Mayor.
Yes.
Councillors, I've heard this argument that's been put tonight by Councillor Hughes and Councillor Koch before, and I have to say that in the early days I was swayed by that. When this first matter came before us, I was unsure. I went and visited the land at the first application, and I think in my naivety I believed. Since then, I've listened to the community. I've read the officer's report. I've found that a number of the officer's report, I believe, are misleading. I believe they're written in a way which is misleading. I can give you any number of examples. I've got them listed here if you want me to validate that. But they often write things in a way or put information in a way which is meant to influence us. You know, we've read things like, if you vote for this for the Exchange Hotel's parking, it'll be maladministration. We were told in a report that if Jensen 2 was released, we'd have a land rush and we'd be putting council in a really horrible position. Just recently in the GM modified report, we were told that there were many organic producers. There's only one in Gawler. We were told that Winterlix is a producer, and they're not an organic producer. So I find that the officers' reports, I'm starting to lose confidence in them. And I think we're being hypocritical. If you look at that area, we have surveyed more than any other item the people of the rural zone, and they have told us 95%, they have said to us, they want change. Even I read today's report on the community plan, and again, the significant response from people is that they want a change. They want to be able to subdivide. They want rural living. They want the ability to go to smaller blocks. They've made the issue about water and all the other things. And it's a fallacy. I thought there was a green buffer zone. There is not a green buffer zone at all. And we saw that when Jensen 2 was released, there was not a land rush. There has not been a land rush. You'll also remember, councillors, I need to remind you of this, that you bent over backwards. You rushed in to change the LMA and the land use for Peter Cuttle. That block of land that he bought right in the middle of a cropping area that you had zoned and said was so precious, you reversed that to allow him to build an industrial facility. That's what you gave permission for. And yet now, hypocritically, where there's Wex want to divide this into two large blocks, you catastrophize it and say that it's somehow going to destroy the croppability of that area. Well, the croppability of the whole rural area that we have is questionable, but you've already allowed that. You've set a precedent when you gave permission for Peter Kittle to use his land. What the Zwecs are asking here is quite reasonable. And I think it's supported by the majority of people, vast majority of people in the rural zone. I hope that we vote this motion down and we stop being hypocritical. We get behind this. And once we voted this motion down, I hope we immediately call for the exact opposite, that we move a motion that allows the Zwecs to proceed. That would be fair and that would be reasonable and that would be consistent.
Thank you. Any other, now, I've already closed the debate, but I might as well open it up again, since our Councillor Tooley spoke after the debate was closed. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? And I will allow Councillor Hughes to speak again. Any other discussion? Councillor Sam.
Thank you, Mayor Karen. You know, the amount of information that we as councillors get, you know, like, wow, it's getting bigger and bigger every week. And, you know, when you read and you go through this, and I know I've spoken to other councillors about this, and we're talking, 6 years ago we were talking about this. I remember it very clearly, and so forth. And when I look at page 12 of the 104 that you all have in front of you here, and you see the type of wording that's there, because my wife used to come from out Rosebery way, and a young lady that used to work for the council here, probably some of the best farming land in South Australia, probably even better than this farming land, is now going to have a college bigger than Trinity College, and it's some of the that crops out there, for anybody that knows on the old language, was getting between 25 and 30 bags per acre off that land. It's now going to be full of houses, and it's now going to have a Trinity campus and everything the whole lot. And when you read these reports that's been taken a long time by Scott or what other staff, it says a few things like the point of the fire worry, and it says that the point of the income pressures, the way farming is changing, and the added pressure of broadacre farming using more pesticides. We all know that's happening, and so forth in that area. It's also stating here that they're going to obtain a couple of the actual properties for a bit of semi-rural type work. I hear these things all the time. I hear what Councillor Tooley said and everything, the whole lot. But to actually cut it off now, after all the work that's been done through the courts, through all this and so forth in this nature, that land will be houses, but certainly, hopefully not like some of the ones that are getting built around here now, wall to wall with bathrooms facing each other. But this is a chance to have a semi-rural type development area. And when you drive down the road, yes, I go and buy straw from you for the garden and all this sort of stuff and so forth. But each year, it's stating in these papers, it's harder and harder to farm because of what's got to be added to make that a viable situation with the rates that they pay and everything. Just recently, Neil's farming enterprise moved out because it was not viable to be there in Gawler. Just sold for $1.7 million. So the land is becoming hugely expensive and so forth. You can't make that out of farming, I can tell you that. I mean, you can make good money out of farming if you work your guts out to pay for all the pesticides you've got to put in there. So I certainly am agreeing with Councillor Tooley. I hope you heard that and so forth, because we need to bring it back and support and move forward. This is going to be a development, whether it's now or 5 years later. And I think what Mr. White has done and the persistence of Peter to pursue this council has got to support, and let's move ahead. It's not going to go ahead if we keep knocking it back. It's just costing a lot of money to do so, and the lawyers are making a real killer. So I will be not voting, not supporting this motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Not Councillor Hughes, you do have the floor now, and I'm woven to it.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, the Peter Kittle site was actually an existing use. There was a nursery, there was machine hire and everything else there. It was quite an untidy site actually. And the proposal was that we were going to get 100 jobs out of the Peter Kittle site. So that's why we rushed into it, because we were promised quite a bit. And again, we put an LMA on that site so we can get the outcome that we want for our community, which is exactly what we've done with this land. Put an LMA in place to protect rural land for our community, so we can have open spaces around rural. Rural living is not going to continue to give us open spaces. It'll be fragmented over time. It's not productive. Each rural living block can't afford a tractor, can't afford a sprayer. So unfortunately, the land management practices on those blocks deteriorate very rapidly. They do grow a lot of weeds, rabbits and foxes and all the rest of it. The fragmentation of our prime agricultural land for housing has been going on for a very long time. Gawler's got this opportunity, and that's why we put the LMA in place, was to protect our precious rural land that is producing really good crops, and we want that to continue into the future. If we want to live in the suburbs of Smithfield or Munpara or whatever, we won't have that buffer if we don't actually value the buffer and protect the buffer, which is what the courts all found in all their rulings, that the agricultural land was important. I think that's that division. People like Danny Dare at Elders tell us that fragmenting the buffer around Gawler will devalue all the housing in Gawler. Danny Dare's quite adamant, and other real estate agents you talk to. So we will devalue our properties by carving up our rural land. We will become just a suburb of Smithfield if we don't have this rural land. But it does produce food, produces really good crops, and that's why the LMA was set up. If we get rid of LMAs, and as a council, if we're seen to continually destroy and rip up LMAs, I think every council meeting we're going to have another LMA before us, which people want to change and amend, because they're always going to be trying to amend them, because the LMAs are put in place for the benefit of all of council. The landowner who bought this property with an LMA on it knew there was an LMA, but yeah, he wants to change it to actually make some money to sell the land for various reasons, but it's still not. This is for the benefit of our whole town to keep our rural zone. And as I said, I'm really quite passionate about this. And I will be calling the division so I can tell my kids who actually voted for cutting up our rural land, who's responsible for taking cropping land and taking this key parcel out of our community.
Debate is closed. Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? It is lost, I think. Can you do that again, please, councillors? Sorry. All those in favour? All those against? It is lost. Thank you.
Is that lost because it's carried?
It's lost.
Yeah,
It's lost.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's
Lost. L-O-S-T, lost.
Division.
Division. Councillor Hughes called a division. All those in favour, please stand. And I'll call your names out. We have Councillor Davies. We haven't got any name tags. Councillor Davies, Councillor Kosh, Councillor Ballalonga. Oh, sorry. Councillor Davies, Councillor Kosh, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Fraser. In favour, all those against are Councillor Ballalonga, Councillor Little, Councillor Samble, Councillor Shanks and Councillor
Julie, that's,
Voted.
I'm a little bit
You've
confused there.
voted in. Can you vote, please?
Yes,
I'm
he's
gonna
he
call
voted.
you.
There's only 1, 2, 3, 4 that voted yes, and there's one.
No, can you please leave it to me? Thank
Sorry.
you. You don't have a vote up here, so you need to vote. You need to cross yes or no. Can you do that, please? Thank you. All those against, I'll just name those, all those against again: Councillor Vallelonga, Councillor Little, Councillor Sandal, Councillor Shanks and Councillor Tooley. The motion is lost. Thank you. Take the seats. Okay. Councillors.
Oh, yeah. the bank's lost.
Councillor Tooley.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to immediately move that we change that wording from council decline, and it now becomes council supports the request, and then that gives us something to move on with rather than leave it hanging. So I'd like to propose that we do that straight away, Mayor, rather than have nothing. Can I move that the council supports the request?
Yes, you may move that motion without notice, and I just want to note that you are allowed a motion without notice. You often complain that you don't get them, so I don't want to hear those complaints again. Thank you. I will accept, yes, Ryan?
Just through the chair, we have provided an alternative motion that has been drafted, that Chris has. Just in case that could be used as a alternative motion. So she may be able to bring it up on the board, and Councillor Tooley may be able to refer to that for clarity.
Okay, so, right, so Councillor Tooley, can you see that alternative motion up there?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, are you happy to move that way?
Yes, can I just ask for a point of clarification, Mayor? Is this essentially the same as changing the word, if we had changed it from the council declines to the council supports? Is this motion having the same effect?
Well, it does say varying clause, and it says into to be divided into 2 allotments. The associated land division, subject to the associated land division application being approved by the CAT, and also the consent of the City of Playford as a party of the agreement, and then it authorises signing, etc. So yes.
Yeah, the only reason I asked that clarification, Mayor, is that I haven't seen that wording before, and I was familiar.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's been clearly drafted by staff. So I'm happy to accept that if that it's valid based on the fact that staff have drafted that. But it's up to you, Councillor Tooley.
Okay, yep, then in that case, I'm happy to move that, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to speak at all?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I think it was Mr. Viney, I might have heard clarifying my question, and I think I'm reassured that this motion that I'm seeing for the first time, that the wording is essentially the same as had we changed the motion that was before us that was just lost, and we changed the word decline to support. So it's great to say that this is having the same effect. And if that's the case, then I think what it does is it summarises the debate we just had, where the majority of councillors have agreed that, for the reasons we've already expressed, we believe that the ZWEC should be able to continue with this, with their submission. And again, for the reasons, without going over them all again, but this supports the hundreds and hundreds of submissions we've had from the rural zone. It supports, I believe, a lot of what Jensen said in their reports. I believe it's consistent with an appropriate use for that area. None of us want, as sometimes has been said in the media by members of this chamber, that the people of the rural zone and some of us councillors were suddenly after 200 square metre blocks and we want Mawson Lakes. None of us have ever said that. We do want a separation between Gawler and the suburbs to our south. But just like to the east of our town, that area where Councillor Kosh lives and Councillor Samble lives, that area there is a lovely transition from the Barossa to our east into Gawler proper. You come up from Sunnydale towards Cheek Avenue, and I use the word a rural living environment. They're half acres, 2 acres, 1 acre, 3 acres, and then it brings us up to Cheek Avenue. And then from...
Sorry, there's a point of order I need to deal with that. What's your point of order?
Where I live is not rural living.
No, hang on, you've got a point of order.
Point of order,
What is your point of order?
point of order is that Councillor Tooley is just making up statements that aren't true.
Right.
I do not live in a rural area. The area he's talking about is Helbeetham. Where I live is very suburban. It is 2,000 square metres. Most of us have 4.
So you're raising the point of order. You're asking me to rule on the fact, do you live in a rural area?
Yes, I do live in a rural area.
No, you don't.
And
so I'm ruling on that.
And if Councillor Tooley would stop calling our area a rural area.
If you just let me deal with that, that'd be great. I am upholding that point of order, but it's not a rural area, that is a residential area, yes, large blocks. But you may continue, Councillor Tooley.
Thank you, Mayor. I did qualify that. I said it's in my opinion, it's a description that I use for that sort of low density area. I call it a rural living. I say I live in a rural living sort of area. It's just my description for that. There may be a more appropriate term, but Councillor Kosh doesn't need to get too upset. I'm talking about a zone of land where you come in from somewhere like Sunnydale to Cheek Avenue, and it is the smallest you're allowed to have is 2,000, and they go upwards from there. What the people of the rural zone want is the same, to come up from the south, to transition into an area of low density where people can enjoy having some space with their land. Nobody wants 200, 400 square meters. I've never, ever heard them apply for that. They've talked about 2 acres, 2.5 acres. We already have an area in that area, which is 0.9 of a hectare already in that area. So it's a nice transition. Then as you move into Gawler proper and you come to the Evanston area, then you start to get to the more dense living. So I think what we're endorsing here is consistent with that ultimate goal. And we're not going to see a land rush. We haven't even seen a land rush with the zone that's already ruled to 0.9 of a hectare. We haven't done that because there's a number of things that have to happen before that type of division can be considered. You've got to look at roads, you've got to look at water, you've got to look at power. All of those things have been prohibitive. This is just allowing for some sensible 2 large size blocks. What does it say on there? Each 13 hectare in size. Come on. We should have done this a long time ago. So I hope we've got a seconder, and I hope that we will endorse this motion.
You have a seconder? Councillor Riddle, do you wish to speak? Any discussion? Right, I'm going to go around the table. Councillor Kosh.
Go start over there. I'll probably explain a bit.
Councillor Shanks, and then Councillor Sample, and then Councillor
I'm happy to support this. I think I've made it very clear every time we discuss rural zoning, these areas. New councillors like myself are coming in at the tail end of this historic disagreement. I can only comment on the way I see it. The way that I see it is we're not defining what it means to lift an LMA. We are defining one as farming land, and if you change it anyway, you are in turn saying that we're going to have another Almond Grove, another Andrews Farm. There is no in between. There is nothing in that motion that reads to me that we are going to have another Huon on our doorstep. The reason I'm in support of it is because I've driven around that area, especially more since I've been on council, and I've seen the lack of activation in those spaces result in caravan bodies, car bodies, unmaintained roads. They're all things that I've seen with my eyes, and I believe that it could be argued that putting a pause on that area may have been the outcome of it. We've been listening to reports from community and the like saying, look, you can say it's prime farming as much as you want, but we've tried. We can't. We don't have the assets. We don't have the infrastructure. All those items that they're bringing to us, we're seeing surveys, we're getting this public opinion. None of what we're agreeing to here tonight is going one way or the other. What we're talking about is a 13-hectare size subdivision, which may result in entrances like what we benefit from Light Council doing with Gawler Belt. You know, those are the sorts of value adders that we have on our perimeter of our town that I think are quite popular with some big spenders, in my opinion. And yeah, I just wanted to make another point. Look, we're here to debate. Everyone has their own opinion. I witnessed Councillor Tooley give his opinion in a respectful manner. Look, if you disagree with it, by all means, let's debate. Let's do what we're here to do. There's no point in point of orders every single time.
Councillor Samble?
Thank you, Mayor Karen. You know, when I was mayor, proudly mayor of this town, my favourite committee, or my non-favourite committee, was the council's assessment panel. I made no secret of it, it was the way it went. What I can't understand is the 10 of us sitting around here, put our names on the polls and say, vote for us, vote for us, vote for us. Now we're asking that committee to make the decision that we've been asked here tonight to make, or to forward a positive decision about letting this development go the way that it has been requested. On that committee is Councillor Shank, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Goldstone. Again, I'm confused. If these two people, the head honcho is in the room, but Councillor Goldstein's not, that doesn't make any sense to me. So please, can somebody maybe explain that? I know it's your decision if you move the room. But when it comes up at the assessment meeting, those three people should be in the room. Or are they going to leave the room?
No.
So we're leaving it to people that nobody in Gawler knows.
No. Do you want me to explain, Councillor Sample?
I'd love you to explain it because I'm confused. I don't know where the public is.
We do need to move on, otherwise we're going to be on another agenda. So I'd ask that we keep moving through and keep that debate to what we need to talk about, which is this matter. Council assessment panels are independent panels. The practice is that if you stay in the room here to discuss it as an elected member, you need to seriously consider whether you stay in the room with the council assessment panel. Councillor Goldstone has said that, and so has left the room. He is the committee member for the independent panel. Councillor Hughes and Councillor Shanks have explained their position as deputy members. It is their decision to decide how they manage their conflict, and I'll leave it up to them to assess that going forward. It is an independent, you know, Brian, as well as I do, that the council assessment panel is an independent panel and deals with the land division. We are dealing with a land management agreement, and council has the role there. It is quite a distinct role. So I'll leave it at that. Any other discussion? Oh, sorry, Councillor, you were next.
Won't take too much time. This is the finish of the wedge. This is where you start fragmentation, and it'll just continue. If you look at all the surveys that we've seen, there is some people saying 200 square metres, some saying 800 square metres, but most are saying 1,500 square metres. If you put 1,500 square metres in the rural zone, you'll have another Linddock out there. That's what will happen. 1,500 square metres. It's not a rural block. It's not rural living. It's a big suburban block that you put a house, a shed, and a driveway on, and that's it. It's not rural living at all. So, for anybody to say that where I live is rural living doesn't understand rural living at all. You need big blocks, and you need blocks that our future farmers, our young, smart future farmers are going to use. The new technology, the new crops that they're going to grow. Because the quickest way to look like you have no, that your land is unproductive, is you stop producing. And it looks derelict, and it looks run down, and it looks like it's finished. That's how you change people's opinions. Because you say, oh, it's unproductive. It's unproductive because you've done nothing with it. And there's a lot of speculators out there doing exactly that. So this is basically thin edge of the wedge, and we will lose the best of the town and country. So I won't be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes?
Something that, yeah, I'll be voting against it, but we in the Jensen report actually talked about $10 million of food production from our rural zone. And this 32 hectares would be producing maybe a small percentage of that $10 million. But it's also about jobs. My first job when I finished at Rosewood Agricultural College was working in the adjoining rural zone on a property on Para. That property is still just functioning and still profitable. There's other similar ones in our rural zone that are still making a living. There's those properties that we talk about when we talk about a rural zone. So that they are producing food for our community. Yes, they're not producing, and there are some vacant glass houses and there is some water issues, but a lot of those glass houses are being used at different times. For cash crops and other crops, but it is seen as productive land, and the PIRSA report within the Jensen states that, and it states it is important to our
We can
state.
focus on the person who's talking, please. Thank you. Keep going, Councillor Hughes.
And our areas that grow oats, wheat, barley are very valuable to us. And unfortunately, yes, Rosewood is losing some valuable agricultural land for a township, but Gawler also has valuable rural land that is producing for those farmers that put in the crops. And as Councillor Koch said, there's new industries, there's new ways. And I think with what we're going through with COVID, people are putting a value on local food and local production. So it's really important that we do value our rural land and our rural zone, and it does remain there for agricultural purposes. But fragmenting rural land is when you end up with the car bodies and things like that. It's taking valuable land out of production for people to live in. It means that land is not producing food. It's also not producing jobs. It's not our tractor repair people aren't repairing tractors or agricultural equipment. They might fix a lawnmower, but they're not fixing a tractor. So it's taking away jobs from our community. And then there's less and less jobs for our people that leave school. And our rural zone does actually employ people at harvest time, harvesting, baling hay. There are straw, as Councillor Sample said. So if we want to continue to fragment our rural land into rural living, those jobs will go, and that food will go. But setting it into 2,000 square metres basically means that we're just going to have a massive residential area. As Councillor Koch says, with a population of Lindop without any infrastructure. So I think it'd be council that would probably be seen by these people that in Cutler who want to subdivide to 2,000 square metres, but then has to put a township like Lindop in place with infrastructure, because I don't think they'd be able to work out how that infrastructure was going in. It'd be, I think it'd be up to this council, unfortunately, to fund it. When you look at the survey results from our community plan, some of the people in Cutler are just talking about some roads being bitumised and some extra lighting. They're not talking about actually having the area change very much at all. Others, as Councillor Koch said, are talking about the 800 square metres, which is residential. So I think it's really important that we keep our agricultural production and our open spaces as productive land, not as growing weeds and car bodies and things like that, which rural living may end up doing.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Ballalogi will next, and then Councillor Davies.
I'm not sure what planet.
If you could turn your mic on, thanks, Jim.
Sure, I'm not sure what planet you're on, but listen, can I just sort of say something? I was born in Gawler. I don't know if a lot of people know that. I was born 63 years ago, almost not two years before Brian. But yes, I've seen all that area. They talk about agriculture. They talk about this. Yeah, they've had some almond plants out there, but I can't see it bursting out the seams. No one can make any money out of that kind of land. It's too dear. There's no water. All this baloney about agriculture. There's all the food's been taken away. That's a load of rubbish. Where is the food? There's no food there now. So where are they taking it away from? Our food comes from places where it's grown in massive amounts. So don't lie to people, please. They're only 10 acre, 20 acre blocks.
Councillor Davies?
Yeah, well, for me, as Councillor Shank said, as new councillors coming in the tail end of all this, there's a whole lot of, I guess, context that's difficult to sort through. For me, one of the things that I noticed just was that we see through the history here that the people who have been moving and seconding a lot of these motions are independent experts that we have on the CAP, which was why one reason why I thought that, we should, listen to what they have to say as well. But yeah, I'm still, a little bit mixed feelings of it all. I don't entirely agree with the argument about the thin end of the wedge and that kind of thing. I think that if council isn't making decisions case by case, then there's no point in having a council that will be run by staff. So I'm happy for things to, come up on an individual basis here. It's just a matter of whether it's, whether the individual case is viable. And I guess that's something that, well, again, we go back to the CAP and its independent members to discover. So I'll be interested to see how that goes.
Right. I think any other discussion, I think there's only one other person that hasn't spoken, and that is Councillor Fraser. So if you don't wish to speak, Councillor Fraser, I'll ask Councillor Tooley to wrap up. That's okay. Councillor Tooley, you can wrap up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And of course, I'll speak in rebuttal to a couple of things here. I think someone made a point about people keep their land tidy or something. We can't regulate that even on suburban blocks. We've got some blocks which are terribly messy and some are really nice. It does come down to the individual owner. The size isn't a matter on that. We need to be aware that Renewal SA owns a big swag of land out there. We also need to be remembering that with the uplift of the electric railway line, there is going to be the potential the government at any point could step in and say, we're going to grab it and we're going to do it, we're going to send it to the SCAP, not to you as Gawler Council, as I've done before with Springwood. And we are going to take control of that. Now, if that happens, we will lose control. And if that happens, you might expect something more like Playford and Manapara rolling out into that area. However, and I've said this to us all before, if we're smart about this and we allow for subdivisions in pockets, we do it sensibly, there may be some viable areas out towards the west, which we would say they should stay at 10 acre minimum. We haven't had that debate yet. But if we do this properly, we can say, and I use the word, don't get so upset about this, I use the word rural living to define an area which is acres, half acres, 2 acres. It's where you can have a horse and a sheep and and a block and a tennis court. It's that sort of density I'm talking about. And that's what the people of the rural zone are asking for. If we do that and we control it and we zone that area in that way, the government can never grab it and say, we've got an electrified railway line, we like infill along the railway line, we're going to allow for a big expansion. We've just seen what's happened to our north at the Roseworthy area. Now, you talk about prime land, they've just grabbed a whole swag of prime land. And if you go back in time when Elizabeth and Manapara were developed, it was all prime land. I've been in Gawler long enough to remember when Riggs Hill was proposed, and there were huge outcries to say we do not want the hills face zone, so that when we're driving up the main North Road, we don't want to see houses on Riggs Hill. I remember that debate, but that debate was lost, and 3 of our councillors bought blocks up there and live up there, even though it was opposed by the council at the time, because they didn't want that visual look. But we've got that visual look. Development is coming. If we're a smart council, we'll do it in a way where we control it. If we sit there and do nothing in this rural zone, it will be grabbed by the government. We will lose control. We've seen them do it with Mount Barker. We've seen them now. We've lost control of Springwood. They will do exactly the same thing with the electrified railway line coming. They love infill. You'll get an expansion of Orleana waters throughout the whole area. Some will say that's a good thing. Most of us, I think, would say no. We would like a less dense buffer coming in. Well, this leans in that direction, but also let's not forget this. This isn't even that size blocks. This is 13 hectares. And I'm presuming that the reason we've got A and B in there is because that's what has to happen. I don't believe we're doing it because we're trying to put another hurdle in the way. I think Mr. Viney told us that that is the logical next step. It has to go to those areas. I mean, if we have the authority to approve this without it going to A and B, I'd take A and B out. But I think that's what Mr. Viney is telling us, Mayor, that might be the case.
Thank you, Councillor Tooley. The debate is closed. I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 11.2. Somebody get past Councillor Goldstone to come back in the room, please. Thank you. We're on page 15, total marketing and funding. Councillor Shakes, you wish to move the motion? Which one?
The first option.
First option, do you wish to speak, Councillor Shakes? You've got the floor.
Yeah, just quickly, I want to repeat myself on endorsing and the work that Bunyip does. I got a little plug there from Ben Taylor, so it sounds like I'm just sort of supportive of that. But look, I think what I'm, as I stated before, what I'm sort of excited to watch unfold is the evolution of what the Bunyip already has and what it can offer us. We've read reports, we've heard the opinion that, you know, we might be steering away from print media. I personally understand, but I don't see why there isn't room for both. I believe that print media still plays a very big role in our community, where we're not the up and coming community that is all digital just yet. We still have a population that does rely on publications like the Bunyip to get their local information, and I believe there's plenty of room for it. I'm in support of working in business as usual model with the Bunyip at this time, with the recommendation that there may be investigation in around the public targeted items where we can put up our public notices, but then we can also use that infrastructure to share them to a broader community in the 160,000 reach that Ben Taylor sort of pointed out to us earlier. So I'm supportive of this, and yeah, I hope we can all get on board and continue showing the support.
So you had your hand up first. Did you want to second?
Yeah, I have a second.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, there's a lot of macroeconomic forces. There's a lot of macroeconomic forces at play at the moment with print media, and people are moving online. For example, classifieds. That's why I used to be Rivers of Gold for print media, but now it's not. It's evaporating. And I do believe that the budget is one of the purpose for our town. It is a community voice, and it's important for our council to get a local local paper. It allows opportunity for the community to get its views, and also for council to provide its commentary, and also important for just public notices, etc. I do think we support them already, and I think if it's business as usual, I think that's good, and potentially there's room there to provide some other support down the track. But overall, I think that's a good motion. I'm going to support it.
Open it up to the floor. Right. Everybody wants to speak? Beautiful. So I'll have Councillor, I'll just call you in order. If you put your hands up, so I don't miss you. We've got Councillor Fraser and Councillor Tooley. No?
Yeah, I was third in the motion.
Okay, so you want to speak? So Councillor Sam, Councillor Hughes, who else wants to speak? Councillor Belmont and Councillor Davies. In that order.
Yes, I'm in favour of this. I do think that we still need to use the budget, and we obviously need our public notices for different things. But we've got a whole demographics of people out there that don't normally follow council activities. And I think that if once a quarter we could put in a half page or a full page with a feel-good story, and maybe letting people know what workshops are coming up, but do it in a I don't know what you're using, printing terms, but do it in a story context rather than just blocks of ads. Because I find that you've got a half a page and you've got a block here and a block there, and they're all different, and very confusing, and people don't really read it. So I think people would sit down and read a story more than they would. And if it could be a feel-good story about what we've done, what we've achieved, but what's coming up as well, what workshops people could attend. Maybe, that's worth looking at. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, your turn.
Thanks very much, Mayor Cameron, and I agree with what Councillor Fraser has said there. The thing is, the Gawler Bunyip is Gawler Bunyip. Okay? If we do not support it, we've got Sam comes along, he could be home watching the big trucking show like I like to watch, or something.
And the table, but that's okay.
Yeah, and then you've got table. Gee, cut back, But, the leader is the opposition paper, but also supports this town. And so therefore, there's a bit of everything in there. But as Councillor Fraser said, there's a dog here, a dog there, or whatever. I was trying to find a page. But the Barossa Council have a full page every week. I was talking to the Business Development Board the other day about the Business Development Board having a full page every week in the budget, saying what the businesses are doing, showing and telling the good news stuff about the businesses that are in our town. But we as a council, with all our many staff that do all this publicity stuff and so forth, we've got to give that. We can't expect Sam or Sarah to be able to have all that on their plate at the time that they need it when they're doing it on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever it may be. And I agree with Councillor Fraser. We have to make sure that we sit down, our promotional team, sit down with the Bunyip and say, right, this is how it's going to work. How many times have I said at this council, what's on? And I look in the Bunyip and it's not on what's on in Gawler. And our tourist officer didn't forward it on to the Bunyip. Well, you can't expect the Bunyip not to print anything unless they've got the information. I just think we as a council get our act together. I totally support the motion that's been put forward here by Councillor Shank. But we, I think, have to spend more time supporting the people that are going to promote us through our paper, the Gawler paper.
Thank you. Councillor Tooley, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, a question through you, Mayor, to Councillor Shanks. I didn't hear, but there were 2.5s in this motion. Which one has he opted already for the first one, or is he open to the second 0.5?
No, he's open. His motion is, as your minutes are right next to you, Ian. You can see the shared screen, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first 5.
Yeah, but
that's what's been moved.
That's the motion.
That's a motion.
There were 2.5s.
No, it was all. It was all, and that's been removed. It is the first motion. What is in front of you is what is being tabled.
So, well,
if you can look at the shared screen, Ian, I know you can see it because I can see it, so you should be able to see it, and it's there in front of you.
Okay, I'm looking at my hard copy, and there are 2.5s. There's one that says "or," and it has.
I'm asking you to look at the shared screen of the minutes. The shared screen of the minutes that's right next to the images of people on your gallery screen.
Okay, well, can I ask my question of Councillor Shanks? Does he not want the other one with the additional amount?
Well, that's what's been moved. Well, no, you've already spoken, and you can wrap up at the end. Okay, thank you. You can include that in if you wish, but that is what is being debated right in front of us.
Okay. Well, Mayor, you often allow this. Can I ask Councillor Shanks if he's prepared to vary that to include some extra amount at 0.5? You often say.
If I can just, because you're breaking up, you're wanting a variation.
Yeah, a variation of point.
Well, what is the variation?
The variation is the alternative 0.5 that was submitted in the papers.
That's not a variation. That's quite different. That's quite different. Yeah, because it's actually got an unknown amount. I think that's quite different. That's not a variation. That's an alternative motion.
All right, my variation.
I'm not going to accept that as a variation.
I'll make my variation very simple. That at 0.5, we add an extra 30,000.
I'm not going to accept that because that is an alternative motion. It is not a variation.
All right, Mayor, I'll speak to the motion now. And I have to say, Mayor, I just cannot understand your rulings. You vary from one meeting to the other. I just can't understand. One meeting you'll allow a motion without notice that completely changes the motion. Then you'll say, oh, yes, you can have a variation or an amendment. Just ask the mover. I just don't know where I am with you in your chairing. But of course, I will speak in favour of this motion because I absolutely support the Bunyip. And I don't believe at number 5 that we're doing enough. I think what we should be doing, even though we've passed a resolution that says for civic centre advertising, we were going to try and do more of it online. Well, it's not working effectively. And I think we could show some generosity to the Bunyip by adding some extra, rather than going purely online for the civic centre, we could add at 0.5 another 20 or 30,000 to say that this is a proactive business. We're getting a benefit from this because of their exposure, that if we were to say we will do more advertising about the civic centre in this, then that would boost this motion. But as I said, Mayor, I just can't keep up with your rulings. You're so inconsistent. And when it comes to me, you put blocks in the way, you facilitate other people to move amendments, variations. And the best example of that is what you did at 11.4 on the 28th of April, where you allowed Councillor Fraser to move a notice to change that motion. I just can't keep up with you, Mayor. I don't know where you're going. You're inconsistent.
I suggest you stop while you're ahead. Thank you very much. Any other, who's next? Councillor Hughes, and then we'll go around the table. Thank you.
Yes, I'm in support of the motion. I do think council needs to improve its digital communication. So it was really good having Ben Taylor tonight. And also, I really was encouraged when Ben Taylor says that just continue the status quo. I thought that was excellent. I think him knowing that council has been supporting the paper so well in the past, and our spend has been helping the paper is good for his business, but hopefully also for the other businesses in town as well. So I think it's really important that we do improve our digital communication, and I think having that digital working relationship, as Councillor Shanks is talking about, is vital. And just the communication with our ratepayers, like we had ratepayers tonight with their estate and the playground, and just how we communicate is so important with all of our ratepayers, and I think that's something that we need to continue. Yes, and Bunyip is really Gawler, so I think it's a Gawler institution. So we have in the past couple of years really heavily supported it, and the dollars are certainly there. So that status quo, I think, will make Ben Taylor happy, and he's already said so. So he said it 3 or 4 times, which is really good. So yeah, I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. I'm going around the table. So Councillor Little, no, you're all good. Councillor Valawonga,
Yeah,
all good.
I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Now, who says, was it, you've spoken, Councillor Kosh, and Councillor David Hughes.
Yeah, look, I'm in support of the motion, and as was pointed out, Ben Taylor did say that, he's not looking for, big extra amounts. He'd just like for us to continue to be consistently supporting the Bunyip. And I think that we are, one thing, I think, it's important that we support the Bunyip. The short period of time where the Bunyip wasn't there, I think was, notable in that, you could see that, there is something important that the Bunyip brings to the town. One area where we support the Bunyip, it's not mentioned on here, is how we provide them with so many juicy front page stories, but I guess we can't put that one on there. But look, I think it's important that we continue to investigate online. I know he said that, obviously running entirely online is difficult, and they do rely on the paper, but it is also a fact that, as he was saying, the majority of their reach, even if it's, there are different types of reach and different levels of engagement. I imagine the people who read the paper, are more thoroughly going through than the people on Facebook who might see, but less, less thorough are still important people to reach, because that's the Bunyip have more that they could accomplish online in the future. So I hope we can just continue to look at that when this continues to come up every year.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Shanks.
Just firstly, I just want to answer Councillor Tully's question. I am moving 1 to 5 because I had a conversation with the Bunyip CEO, Ben Taylor, about his comfort in the motion, and just to pick his brain, I guess, and to educate myself on how a business model such as his operates. I'm not a professional in that field, so I did seek to educate myself leading up to my first motion I put, and the follow-up targeted marketing in the Bunyip that's resulting from it. I think Councillor Hughes put it very well that we do support the Bunyip. I would love to be able to throw more money at local business. I would love to throw money at every local business until we're all broke, to be honest. But it's not the reality. So what I am excited about, and I'll reiterate this, is the mutual benefit that we will get by engaging with the asset that is the bunyip and really tapping into and noticing what their strengths are, playing with them, and working with to be able to tap into that community. Yeah, Councillor Cody Davis pointed it out earlier that yes, there is a bit of clickbait. We do get those comments, and yes, we probably should get a discount with the amount of drama we provide. But those clickbait stories are engaging. They are putting us front and centre to a lot of people, and we won't roll on that. We're recording live on YouTube. You know, we're noticing these trends, tapping into it, and using the bunyip is the best way forward. And yeah, this motion is just supporting that, and also pushing in a direction that we're getting bang for buck as well. So yeah, as I said, really looking forward to watching this space.
The debate is closed. I put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? Oh, hang on. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 11.3 on page 21, draft budget business plan update. This is an update. It is a noting report. How do you wish to proceed? You wish to move the motion?
Yeah.
Having moved, do I have a second? Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak? Councillor
Yeah, I think we've spent a lot of time working through this and working with the Gawler Business Development Board. I think it's a good outcome, and it will be supporting our local businesses. Very important. I'm quite excited by the $2 million largesse from the federal government, in particular, potentially being able to replace all the LED lights in the streets. At the moment, we're spending $434,000 on street lighting. By putting the LEDs in, we'll drop that to $215,000, so we'll have a saving of $215,000 a year forever. And also there's some savings also within the buildings as well, as on page 608. So there's, and also supporting the community sporting groups as well. So I think there's a good suite of activities in that $2 million. And I think that'll generate a lot of goodwill and a lot of economic stimulus within the community. So I'm going to support this noting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak? Any other discussion? Councillor Tooley. Sorry, I thought David was going to turn your microphone off.
Thank you. I'd just like to be on the record to say why I don't support it. I've said this at all of the workshops. I don't think by any means we're going far enough at all. I don't think we've shown enough leadership. I don't think we've made enough cuts. I don't think we've thrown enough economic stimulus. I think at the end of the day, in a sense, we're living in denial. I think we're trying to say, look, we'll balance the books at the end of the day, one way or the other, by the way we spend the money or the way we get it back through rates. But we're not really making significant cuts. I read in the Advertiser today that the Adelaide City Council, and there's been a lot of articles about what councils are doing. Adelaide City Mayor today has said that they believe they've got to really slash the rates and the fees they're going to charge their businesses in order to stimulate them. We just had an opportunity with the bunyip. What we've essentially done, and of course I support it because it's better than nothing, but what we've essentially done is said, we're going to give you 20, 30 grand for the next 6 months because that's what we normally do. We had an opportunity with the other 0.5 that dropped off for some reason. We had an opportunity there to actually do something that would be a stimulus for the bunyip and say, we're actually going to reverse that decision about civic centre advertising going more off permanent print into online. And we might throw another 20 or 30,000 at our bunyip. And you know, with the way the bunyip is suffering from a loss of advertising, us as a council are throwing that extra.
Sorry, Councillor Fraser's called a point of order. You've got points. No, I actually support Councillor Tooley on this. Is part of this. We are talking about budget, and this is a budget item. So I think that keep going, and I don't uphold that point. Thank you.
Did someone just call a point of order against me or something again? I didn't hear it.
Yes, and I didn't uphold it. You can keep going, Councillor Tooley.
Oh, thank you. And as I was saying, by us throwing that bit of extra at the bunyip in a very deliberate way, we could have been just making that little bit of difference. And that's what every one of our businesses in Gawler are going to need. And it's what our local residents are going to need, because if anyone was lulled into the impression that this second wave of the COVID isn't coming, then you haven't been paying attention to the media. Look what's happening in Victoria. Look what's happening in America. Look what's happening across the world, where it's on an absolute rapid uprise. Now, that means that if we're going to keep us safe in South Australia, we're going to keep those borders shut. Nobody's coming and going out. That's a sustained impact. Even if we keep COVID out of South Australia, which I hope they do, and that's one of the reasons I'm not there tonight. I'm still trying to play safe, because I've only got to get exposed to someone that infects my wife, and it's fatal for her. So I'm trying to be careful. We are venturing out, but we're being careful. Because South Australia's borders will be shut off, watch ABC, Alan Kohler, the series on recession. This is the worst in 100 years. It's going to bite. And I just don't think we've realized that yet. I don't think we're making anywhere near enough concessions, nowhere near enough stimulus. So I'll just keep singing the same song. I'm happy to go on the record. Maybe I'll sway some of you, but there are reasons, just some of them, why I can't support this, even though it's just noting, because it's just, I've got to be consistent with what I've been saying to you. And if you remember, you all mocked me back in March when I said to you, we need to be careful about COVID. Ah, no, you scheduled extra meetings face to face. And then what happened? You got told, didn't you, that COVID was serious. So, you know, I've been working with the council about climate change, about COVID, but I don't listen to. Maybe it's about time people started listening.
Thank you.
Is that another point of order? Someone else calling a point of order again?
Thank you. I'm going to move on. Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Sheares?
So yeah, this is a noting of the report. I guess I've taken some comfort in talking to the Gawler Business Development Group quite closely, and business owners in the town. Do I think we're doing everything we can? Personally, I don't think we are. Is this a step in the right direction? Yeah, I believe it is. And I'm backed up by the business owners, the Gawler Business Development Group. We are getting the buy-in from stakeholders. I think I've made the point before that as good as we are at some items, we aren't educated enough to know what some of these ratepayers do need at their time of need. So I think it was very important to engage these stakeholders. I think it has benefited us, and there very well might be another direction that we need to go to amp this up again, as we've been doing the way through. I would have liked for it to be a bit speedier, but look, we're here now. I'm hearing reports that we, financially, businesses are taking hits now, but it's also going to be another hit is going to come apparent to other industries in January, February next year. So, this isn't the tail end. We are going to see a bit of more of a domino effect, and putting these footings, I like to call them, for the infrastructure now to be able to build on in the future is very important to me and the people that I'm speaking for. So, I'm supportive of noting this and look forward to, again, watching the space and seeing how we advance in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Karen. I think it's just important to reference, as noted in the report, that what we're proposing in terms of rate remissions is, from a sector point of view, we're very much in the minority, as indicated on page 27 of 24, relative to what most other councils are doing is simply proposing to, in some cases, similar to us, have a 0% increase in general rate revenue, but that's across the board. But the point of difference I see for us and a handful of other councils is that we're actually proposing genuine rate reductions for those who need it. And a lot of the other councils, Mayor, they're really just proposing what we were doing in the first instance, which was rates deferrals, which isn't actually reducing their financial commitment, it's just pushing the financial pain out. I think it's just important to again reference that we are proposing in the Rates Relief Fund sizable rate reductions to those who need it. And as the members are aware, there's been a series of discussions with the Gawler Business Development Group, who I've spoken to them today, Mayor. They're very much on board with what we're proposing from the commercial perspective. So I think, I'd like to think from Town of Gawler's perspective, this is a very proactive step that we're taking. And it's certainly far and far from what I've seen that the majority of the rest of the sector is doing.
Any other discussion? Hands up if you wish, Councillor.
Yeah, I think this is something that, you know, I've been trying to figure out through the whole process how we can, you know, help as much as possible. And I think it is true that we have created a solution that is, in a lot of ways, doing things a lot of councils aren't. I mean, the unfortunate downside is that it's a lot harder to explain. Like, I think that's the simplicity of the no new rates method, is that it's a slogan that can fit on that, you know, on the aforementioned, you know, Facebook post on the Bunyip that 150,000 people see, you know, and so it's a nice snappy, like, here's what we've done in one sentence. And I think we've got a range of really interesting things that I think we're sort of at times struggling to have the average resident understand. So I just hope that we can continue to have a better marketing strategy on that front. But I do think we have got some good stuff in here.
Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Koch. Close the debate.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. It is only a 19 report, but I just wanted to say quickly, I think up to now, I think what we designed, what we potentially put in place is up to financially responsible. Because we are probably one of the biggest employees in town, so we need to make sure that we're viable and we're providing that support, not only to our employees, but also to the wider community where we're using contractors, etc., etc. We have to really be conscious of our ability to what we can do. We're not the federal government. Local government only takes in 4% of the tax take in Australia. Federal governments can do things like sell bonds, which it actually did recently, and was a big take up. So they sold a lot of bonds internationally, and that provided the funds for the JobKeeper, etc., etc. They can also do things called quantitative easing, where you actually just print money. So, you know, that's a strategy that they've got. They can do that. We haven't got those strategies. We have to work within our budgets, within the requirements of our community. We have to make sure that we stay viable and sustainable in the long term. And I'm just concerned. I mean, I am concerned about the recession that we're going into. It's going to be very hard, quite deep. People are calling it W curve, up and down. But I'm just concerned that we, as a council, do things that are reasonable and responsible for the long-term benefit of our community, not short-term, I suppose, knee-jerk reactions. That's my biggest concern. So I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? Please carry. Thank you. Now we're moving on to page 35, 11.4.
I've got a perceived conflict of interest.
Yes.
I'm the treasurer of the Gawler Auxiliary of the Royal Society for the Blind, and we use rooms like free. So I don't want to be the. Yep. Thank you.
Chris will note that in the minutes. Thank you. We have item 11.4, councillors. Councillor Goldstein, you happy to move that motion?
I just got a question.
I might ask for removal and second first. Are you happy to move that motion? Do I have a seconder? Seconder? Mover, do you wish to speak at all? Then I'll come to your question.
Just briefly, it's more a cost recovery, fees and charges across the board, roughly 2%, 2.4%. So the fees and charges is fairly consistent with what we've had previously, workshops and everything else. So happy to support it.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Fraser, you seconded. Do you wish to speak at all? I'll go to your question, Councillor Goldstein.
Yeah, ordinarily I would support it straight away, but given we first looked at this back in March, which was before the COVID-19 thing blew up, and we now know ramifications of that bit. And I'm wondering whether it is in fact a good time to be actually increasing all these things, or whatever. I guess the question is, do we know what the financial impact would be of maintaining the existing rates and charges? Fees and charges rather than increasing them, whether that's, as I said, the rest of this calendar year or the full financial year.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Karen. In relation to the percentage of what these fees and charges represent of our revenue budget, it's in the order of about 10%, so very modest. And I think, as Councillor Hughes referred to, this is really cost recovery in terms of user charges. So all we're really seeking to do, Mayor, is maintain that cost recovery for the various services. And yes, these were the fees as presented back in March, but I do believe they are sort of appropriate and are on nominal to CPI adjustments, and the dollar impact is pretty modest.
Thank you. Wish to speak to the motion?
Actually,
Okay, no problem.
bear with me, it might lead into a question. Councillor Goldstein actually went down the same sort of theme that I was going to be questioning as well. I sort of wanted to knuckle down into the average increase of 2.31%. I read that and I go, okay, Rose, it is modest and everything like that, but I wouldn't mind really dumbing it down even further and just saying, what does that mean in dollar figures? If we're increasing our fees and charges 2.3, what do we mean in dollar figures? How does that look?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Karen. Look, in relation to, as I touched on before, the user charges represents, I think, less than 10% of our operating revenue. So obviously the bulk of our revenues from general rates and then grants and subsidies. So if the fees were to be, if the members were of the will to reduce the impact, the increase, then acknowledge the impact dollar-wise wouldn't necessarily be material, but I would hasten to point out that, again, this is really cost recovery for various services that are provided on a user fee basis. And if the liquor members were wanting to vary the proposed fees downwards, then there would be obviously further implications on the budget. But in terms of what that would mean there in dollar terms, I couldn't give a definitive figure. It really depends on the nature of the reduction. But again, acknowledge it's not, they don't represent it only represents a relatively small part of our revenue budget, but bearing in mind a lot of these services we're charging are already heavily subsidised by general rates. There's only, I think, the cemetery and dog control there that's effectively 100% cost recovery. So in saying that, if these fees were to be further reduced in terms of the increase not being as large as proposed, then the natural consequence of that from a budget perspective would be increasing the deficit or having to increase the general rates to offset.
So, okay, I'm going to keep going with somebody who's wants to comment. It sounds like people want to debate this, and it is 25 past the time, so we've got an hour. Any other discussion before I go back to the question? I don't have the, it does make it easy with the chair, but not there.
I have a question. Am I allowed to have a question?
I can't hear you. Can you turn your mic off?
I have a question.
Thank you.
Okay, is this increase on top of the valuations, after the valuations of this year? Because, or on the council rates themselves?
No, this is fees and charges for our community groups and all our facilities. That's correct, isn't it?
What extent are?
There's actually an attachment. If you look at the attachment 1, it goes through.
Yeah, where's the money come from?
I beg your pardon?
Where does the money come from?
If you look at attachment 1, it
Yeah.
shows you.
Sorry,
Shows you.
I've looked at it.
It's shows you. I'll refer you to attachment 1 in the documents, and it's all there. Where who's being charged and how for how long. For example, the kitchen in the recreation centre, the different rooms, the elderly centre, etc. And they're all subsidised, as Paul said.
Yes.
They're heavily subsidised by rates.
Okay, now I got it. Yeah, I was confused then, sorry.
That's okay. It's perfectly right. Any other discussion? Now, well, you've already spoken.
Just asked.
You asked a question. Okay. And well, I was going to go back to Councillor Shank. Are you going to ask that question? No, you don't have to.
I just want to simplify stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
The point I was making is, I apologise for the confusion here. Gawler Aquatic Centre average increase is 2.3%. What in dollars is that to the fees they pay now in comparison to what we're increasing? Not decreasing, nothing to do with our budget. How much more are we asking in dollars?
Shall we refer to attachment 1? Might be easier. Attachment 1 is in our agenda, and it does actually say our fees and charges, current and proposed. So you've got the draft, and you've got the percentage increase. So there's your draft, what it is.
So what
Actually tells you, it's the 1920 adopted amount, and then the new amount in there on page 177, 176, etc. in the attachment. Yeah, there, top. 310, 320. That's right, per hour. So the information is in there. I think that's what you're asking. I got that right.
So we're saying $5 increase.
For which one?
The Gawler Aquatic Centre refund. That's what I'm reading.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, just to clarify whether it's the Gawler Aquatic Centre or the other services listed, what we've endeavoured to demonstrate is if you refer you to if we focus on the pool, for example, on page 176 or 608, you'll see there the first line under the aquatic centre for a casual adult, for example. The fee for 1920 that was adopted was $6.50. What we're proposing is that would increase by 50 cents to $7. Similarly, if you then look down at adult pass, for example, looking at that going, which provides for 15 visits, looking at that fee increasing from $85 to $87, and so on.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Goldstein. I would ask why you didn't ask these questions before the council meeting. Is there a reason? Okay, I'll keep going.
The fees and charges are one thing that we can set or we can influence. The majority of them anyway, in some of them it's minor as others. For example, the cemetery fees come up a fair bit. I just wonder if now is it going to be a good look and a good time to be raising these fees when we could defer it for 6 months or at least defer for another month or so, just to get some more information for the dollar impact on the budget rather than percentages and so on. I fully understand the need to increase, and some of them are very, very minor, but it doesn't affect everyone, from funding comprehensive cemetery. These are going to affect people. So, personally, I would prefer to defer it for a month, but it's just my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Chorley, you've got
Yeah, just briefly, Mayor, I've listened to most of that. Some of it's not easy. I would say that when you yourself, Mayor, and others speak a bit closer to the microphone, it does make it easier at my end. So I would ask that you guys would do that. Yeah, I'm not supporting this for the very similar reasons that I've mentioned before, so I won't go over them again, but I just don't think that we're making sufficient cuts. I did call for a workshop where the elected members could have a really good look at savaging the budget in order to make a big difference, but that was hijacked into a different type of workshop. We never got that opportunity to have a good open debate. I think we owe it to our ratepayers that we as elected members do that. We shouldn't just be relying on the officer's recommendations. It is, after all, when a budget is passed, when the rates are passed, all the officers of this council will step back at any criticism and they would simply say, council decided, you the elected members decided. And yet we have very little influence. We just titter around the edges rather than getting stuck right into the budget. And that was what my workshop was. We should be doing our job. We should be getting together. We should be cutting and slashing that budget in order to make cuts that make a difference for our community, and not carrying on with a rate regime that does not really recognise the significance and the depth of the recession and the hurt that is in our community. I'll leave it there. They're the reasons I just can't support it. And I just don't think we're doing our job, guys.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any other comments, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, just firstly to answer your questions, Mayor, I received the 800-page pack on Friday afternoon after working full time. Unfortunately, I had a bit on over the weekend and I had one business day to present these questions. I don't have the time, unfortunately, so I didn't pick up on those figures there, so I do apologise for that. And I also asked these questions publicly because the way that I believe our chamber and the people listening might read these reports might parallel the way I do. So trying to simplify the percentage to a 50 cents figure, I feel is very important for our community. And I'm a lot like Kelvin, the deferring of this to a month or two to really delve into it would probably, I don't know if it doesn't hurt us, I would be in support of that.
Any other discussion? Councillor Hughes, you can close it.
Yeah, just briefly, they are really just minor rounding out changes. It's not, and as in the report, it is a heavily subsidised. A lot of the discounts, 100% discounts anyway. So we're also looking with what we're already doing for our community with COVID, probably a $1.6 million deficit coming up. So this is only a minor part of it. Our fee structure. There may be other things that we need to do in the future to help our community over the next 12 to 3 years. Definitely, this is only a very minor thing, so I'm quite happy to move.
Debate's closed. I put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? It is carried. Okay. So we're moving on to 11.5, and we'll ask Kosh to come back in the room. We now have 11.5, approval of expenditure prior to adoption of the annual budget. The CEO, I'm offering a few comments as to why this is in the agenda.
Through the chair, given the COVID situation and the extension of time that needed, and the extension of time that we are taking for the purpose of processing the budget and getting to a point of adopting the budget, which our work program is through the end of August. There is a window, a couple of months there that we won't actually have an endorsed budget. So this gives the authority to me to keep business ticking over, keep expending money in accordance with what would otherwise be provided for the budget. So that's the purpose of this report.
Thank you. We have a second, Councillor Hughes.
Yes. I think this is very important because we do have to function. If we don't have any money, we basically come to a standstill.
Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak for any other discussion? If not, I'm happy for me to put that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tooley, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have a question, Mayor. I tried to work out what that meant. In point 3, it references a term called paragraph 2 of this resolution. It says it again in point 4. What is that referring to, please? Paragraph 2 of this resolution. What is that?
Paragraph 2 is point 2 of the resolution. So paragraph 2 is point 2, which says, pending the adoption of the 2021 budget, Council approves the expenditure of Council funds on work, services and operations of the Council identified in attachment 1. So in attachment 1, it identifies the works, services and operations. And as the CEO said, because I thought it was important that he explained, is that if this isn't approved, then Council can't function. So because the budget's been extended, or the proposed budget is extended, our budget currently finishes end of June, 30th of June. After that point, we don't have anything. We have nothing. So we can paralyse this council effectively. Nothing will happen. There'd be no authority to do anything. In fact, it's quite a legal responsibility to actually keep things ticking over until we approve the new budget, which is its hope is forward at the end of August. And that's because the government has made a direction, as we know, that we are allowed to endorse our budgets at a later time than is normally allowed. And this is because of these emergency declarations. So I guess if we don't move this, then council becomes paralysed up to 30th of June, which is, in my view, if you want my view, for what it's worth, that's quite responsible. Yeah.
Mayor, I'm not sure if you understood my question. I did hear what CEO Anat said, and I have read the report, but I'm confused with the wording of point 3 and 4. Point 3 says, the Chief Executive Officer is authorised to expend the council's funds approved in paragraph 2 of this resolution. Now, does paragraph 2 mean point 2 of this resolution?
Yes.
Okay, because that would have been better. Point 2 is not a paragraph. Point 2 is just point 2. The report should have said, as approved in point 2 of this resolution. And point 2 says, pending the adoption of the 2020 budget, council approves the expenditure of council funds on the works, services and operations of the council identified in attachment 1.
So I think we've clarified that, Councillor Tooley. Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Fraser, are you happy for me to put the motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. All those against, it is carried. Thank you. Now, moving on to 11.6, monthly finance report. Thank you, Mr. Lord and your team for this report. You happy to move the motion? So I might ask for a seconder. I'll put you down as a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sample. Councillor Fraser, you've got a, you can speak to the, you can ask the question. It's really up to you.
Just a couple of things, Mr. Howard. 14,000 variation to the immunisation income. Is that because the schools were closed? That on the income?
Through you, Mayor Karen, I'm not necessarily sure. I don't think it's necessarily in relation to the school being closed. I think it's referenced in the report is in relation to the school's immunisation program. I don't believe that was due to the schools being closed. Les Ryan, from Jack's perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide some comment. That is through the chair. The school program, the school immunisation program was deferred until later in the year because of low attendance rates at the beginning of this term.
And then just a further question. $13,000 fuel tax credit to be found in the order.
Yes, through you, Mayor Karen, we do have an independent firm who does our fuel tax credits returns for us, and that's done on a monthly basis. What we had done, Mayor, was we did engage a firm who approached us on a no win, no fee basis to do a audit for the last 4 years, and there was just some anomalies they had identified through changes with the legislation that identified, yes, that we could pick up that extra funding.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just looking through the document. Through the document, there's scattered vehicle contributions throughout the document. Is it possible to get some reconciliation of where we are with vehicle contributions, who's got vehicles in and what contributions they're doing? So I find it very confusing to work out. I think there's some new ones there this time. Is there, or,
We might take that.
yeah, I noticed, yeah, that was just something I picked up. Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Fraser, happy to put the motion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against. Against, it is carried. Thank you. Now we're moving on to 11.7. 4 of the agenda. It's borrowing capacity to accommodate our COVID relief fund, etc. You have to move that way, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Goldstone, I see your hand up. Do you have to move a second? So we have a mover and a second. Do you wish to speak? Mover? No. Second? Any discussion? Do you wish to speak? All right, I don't think I turned your mic off. That's all right. Any discussion? Councillor Tooley.
Yes, I'll be supporting this motion. I think borrowing money at this time when money is relatively cheap is a good move. We have had presentations before from our finance staff that talk about the advantages where even going into a deficit, a strategic deficit, and borrowing money when it's cheap and you can pay it back over a long time. Is this enough? I doubt that it will be enough, but it's at least a start, and it's for the right purposes, so I'll support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Koch, you wish to speak?
Yeah, just a question and not speak. Have we received any comment from independent members of the audit committee on this?
I don't think it's gone to you.
Through you, Mayor, this specifically in relation to what we're seeking tonight, or our approach with the Treasury management?
Oh no, just this specific motion.
No, through the Mayor, no, it hasn't gone through the audit committee, but suffice to say, I'm certainly aware the audit committee, particularly independent members, safe to say, very supportive of the Treasury management approach we've used. Because I think, as we've mentioned in the report, Mayor, since 2011, the only borrowings we've had is via the cash advance debenture, which is essentially an overdraft. So we know we dispensed with the fixed term loans in 2011. They're being repaid over a number of years, but the fundamental transition we made in 2011 to these effectively overdraft facility has delivered massive financial savings to us, and all we're really seeking to do here, Mayor, is to continue that approach, noting the LGFA, to their credits, from pressure from the LGA, has acknowledged that they will be providing a further interest rate reduction of 0.75% for the equivalent of $2.9 million of those borrowings. Hence why we've had to split it in the motion tonight.
I'll speak to the motion. I'm happy to support this motion on this occasion. But I feel that I'm just concerned that we might be getting close to the upper limit of what might be comfortable over the long term. So that's why I was hoping to get some input from the independent members. And then I think that we can't borrow ourselves out of this problem. I think there might have to be some other strategies long term to make sure that we're financially sustainable. So that's just my comment, but I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Through you, just to quickly respond to that, so it's clear, what we're proposing here is for council to have the capability to draw down to $5 million. Rest assured, we'll only be financially drawing down what we need. So it's really there just as a contingency, should we need it.
Yeah, I'll be in support of this motion. This report, the only thing that I did pick up on, and I just really want to make this one clear, is in the background, we've got a bit of background on why we're going down this, and I've just picked up, the $2 million economic stimulus package incorporating wherever possible projects targeted towards local employment. I think we really need to make sure that we're not going to engage economic stimulus until we have projects targeted towards local employment, not wherever possible. That's what we do. And we exhaust every opportunity that we've got locally and reassess that if that's the project we want to advance if we can't stimulate locally. Is the only point that I just want to point out. Just really want to watch that as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Fraser, you happy for me to put the motion? That motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand or click yes, or all those against, please click no. Can you please keep it up? Keep your hand up. Thank you. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. And now we move up to 11.8. Moving page 49. That's all right, Chris, it's 11.8. I did this one, or no? Didn't this one, did I? No, that's all right. Right, and that's on page 49. And this is our COVID-19 update. Thank you to everyone involved for pulling that together. Support continues. We do have a recommendation. I think we accept the opposite recommendation of these three choose councillors. Yeah, you move that way, Councillor Shanks. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hughes. Councillor Shanks, do you wish to speak at all?
Yeah, the reason I'm moving this is it's keeping everyone up to date. I'd love to be able to see some of these newsletters that we're getting really simplified, and again speaking to local publications about getting the message out there simply. And I think it's just that connectivity engagement that I'm all for. But the report itself is just focusing on how far we've come, and that's what I'm for.
Thank you. Seconder, you wish to speak? Any other discussion? If not, mover, are you happy to put the motion? Put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Sorry, Councillor Tooley. Councillor Tooley, you wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, Mayor. Again, I'd be repeating a lot of things, but I've just got a few dot points here. I think it's not enough, and I don't think that the report is true in all respects. I definitely don't think that or believe that staff safety has in any way been sufficient. I don't believe that the financial measures that have been put in place are in any way adequate. And I don't think there's been sufficient proactive, really deep proactive leadership or compassion by the Town of Gawler administration. So I'll be voting against this.
I will now go to you, Ruben, and ask you again if you'd like to close the debate, given we have extra. You're happy for me to put it? Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against, please click no. It is carried. Thank you. Now we're moving on to page 62. 62 of 1.4, Climate Emergency Australia. You have to read that one?
Well, I am, but I'm just a bit concerned about point 2. If I can ask a question, it says here that they're looking for the $2,000, but then if you go over to page 63, there's a paragraph there that says the Town of Gawler is still in the process of developing CEAP as such a financial contribution to a CEA funder may be tracked and progress towards completing and implementing our own. So I'm wondering, considering that paragraph there, why are we asking $2,000 now?
What I might do is ask for a mover. You happy to move? I'll get a mover and seconder. Ask if anyone else is happy to move this way. Councillor Tooley, are you happy to move the motion, the officer's recommendation? Is that what you're... Okay, I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davies. I'll let them speak and then I'll return to your question and make that addressed. So Councillor Tooley, you have the floor as a member.
Okay, I couldn't quite hear what Councillor Fraser was asking. Was there something about the resolution that was wrong?
She's asking a question around the 2,000 and so we will address that once I get a move and second that. So you've got an opportunity to speak to your motion if you wish.
Okay. Yeah, look, I think the motion and the report is fairly self-explanatory. Just as a little bit of background, when I attended the Climate Emergency Summit in Melbourne in, I think it was February, you sent Jack from the Youth Advisory Council, from the Climate Emergency Action Plan group as your rep. But as I pointed out to you, he wasn't able to engage in the sections of that conference which related to councils, but I was as a self-funded delegate. And I was nominated to join a working party. And I've been meeting with them via Zoom since February and worked as a national group to put together Climate Emergency Australia. And we put that together as a common sense body for all councils that have joined and made a climate emergency and those that we are hoping will, so that we have some collective strength in terms of action and developing plans. You would have seen, you see in, I think, point 3, it talks about the city of Charles Sturt. What happened there was their council cycle, this motion that you have here came before them early and they jumped. I think they made a $5,000 donation to be a significant founding member. And we were slightly out of timing with that, and that's why it's taken until now to come forward. But by joining it, we will get a significant benefit. We'll have a significant voice and we'll have a significant benefit that will help the work of our Climate Emergency Action Plan Working Group. It'll help them greatly. We do have the capacity to nominate, but if you've read the report, the Climate Emergency Action Plan Working Group is saying they feel at this point that we should support the existing nominations rather than nominate ourselves. So it's probably not the decision I would have made, but I'm happy to go along with that. They've obviously talked it through. And I would hope that you would support this motion. It's a benefit to us. It's consistent with all of our working Climate Emergency Action Plan. And it should add significantly to the positive work that working group is doing at our council.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Davies?
Yeah. There was significant discussion about this one at the Climate Emergency Working Group. We did decide to support the nomination of City of Charles Sturt and Campbelltown. My understanding is that there are 2 spots open for South Australia, and for us to send in a nomination for us to say that we're competing against those other councils for a spot on that committee, and given that it also got brought up that Councillor Tooley is part of the working group, which is a separate thing from this from what we have here, but it is something that has been happening, and yeah, I'm happy to support. They had some good. One of the nominations was a mayor, and the other one was but they were both good candidates. So yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Any other discussion? Councillor Tooley, you happy to close the debate? Oh, sorry, your question. I beg your pardon. You had a question, so I might ask Mr. Bynum to address that question. Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, that statement was just put in there to provide some balance to the report. Obviously, we appreciate that finances are limited towards throwing at projects and initiatives. obviously this is a contribution of $2,000 coming out of our funding for other projects. So just a statement like that.
Just a bit here that it could detract from what they're doing. So to put a contribution in now may detract from the progress towards completing. So why is it going to detract while we're
I think it might be just
I actually can't hear a word you just said. Sorry, can you speak into the
It's just that we're the motion, and I don't have a problem motion asking for $2,000. But then over here, it says that to make a donation now may detract from the progress that we're doing. So it's contradicting.
That's something you've got to consider. Not clarify. Point of clarification.
Yes, I was at the meeting. Around that issue, what detract from the effort that is going into developing the climate emergency plan, not necessarily the money, because more the effort. So we've channeled some of the potentially one of our members into something else, and would take the effort away from that production of that plan. So, and because we're actually only at the moment developing that plan, so we should concentrate on it first. That was the main thing. So it's really about effort, not money. Yeah.
I think that clarifies that. Yes. So that was more around that reason.
Yes,
not nominating an extra person, but focusing on the seat.
Yes, that's the reason.
I think that clarifies that. Councillor, okay, so Councillor Tooley, if there's not a further discussion, Councillor Tooley, you can close the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The $2,000 is a small amount of money. We would spend more each week on legal fees trying to block my questions without notice than we would on this $2,000. We racked up tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees over what I consider as nonsense. So this is $2,000 well spent. And we're getting an incredible benefit because the organising group are employing an officer, and there's been some significant contributions made already, both in kind and in dollars, by many of the eastern state councils. So this is quite a small amount of money for a significant benefit.
Thank you. The debate is closed. To put that motion, all those in favour, please raise your hand or click yes or no. All those against, carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to page 66 of 104, we have the Town Board Community Plan update. Before we do that, you'll have moved a motion.
For extension of time, it is now 10 o'clock.
Thank you so much,
Until 11 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you have a second, Councillor Shanks? Thank you. All those in favour? All those against? All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? It is carried. Thank you.
What do you know?
Now we move on to page 66. We have a noting report, and we're seeking a draft be generated. That's next step for our community plan. You happy to move that way? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak at all?
Just briefly, I was actually quite impressed with the survey results. I don't think it was really accurately captured in the officer's reports. The comments really, was a disappointed of that, but and I think it shows us how these short surveys and just getting answers to questions, and I think it's really important, even if your ratepayers are having a go at council, you actually know what they're having a go about. And I was actually encouraged by it because there was points of view that are very contrary to what we've been hearing from other councillors about different things. It was quite good to get that mixed range. So hopefully we can continue that with the draft and continue on. So yeah, happy.
There were some excellent suggestions for a vision statement. Really it's an interesting one, but also it's an excellent one. So I was really impressed with people's thought process. Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak as a seconder?
Yes. I agree. I thought some of the overarching vision statements were really good. But I was also very impressed with the emails with Murray Ankovic, is that how you say it? I thought his email was spot on. Yeah, I did like that.
Thank you. Councillor Tooley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, yes, Mayor, I'll be voting in support of this because I think the points that it's making are proper. But the one thing I would ask of our officers when they're writing their reports is that they are a little bit more careful in the way they write them. And I guess that comes through to how Mr. Inat also vets them. There's a thing called a false equivalency. And that applies in a number of these reports that we read. For example, they'll say, oh, well, there was two sides to the argument. Well, we get that with the Flat Earth Society, and they'll say, well, there are two sides to it, but we don't give any credit to the people who say the Earth's flat, even though they've said it, because it's out of balance. It's not even 0.1%. We say the same thing with a whole range of other issues. The Holocaust, they'll say, well, there's two sides, but we don't give them any airspace because they're not even 1%. I've read reports on the rural zone. I've read reports related to community plans where they'll give a paragraph on each. When in fact, when you look at the data on both sides, they'll give a paragraph on both sides or more. When you look at the data, you might find 95% of the people said one thing and a very small group said the other. And yet the way the report can be written, it tries to give the impression that there is equally balanced both sides. That's called a false equivalency. And anybody that understands that in reporting and analysis will know what I mean by that. So I would ask that our officers, when they do report, that they take that into account. If we have an overwhelming majority in one area, then a small minority that say the opposite should not get equal weight in that report. You need to have the data well and truly provided, and the reporting of that data needs to be very analytical and very clear and very honest in the summary. Often when I read these reports, I get a clear feeling that the person who's written it, or maybe the people who are vetting it, have a bias, and that bias comes through in the report, and that then influences the way people vote. And that actually is incorrect. I don't know if it's illegal, but it's certainly not moral, and it's not the right way to do it. So I'm a great believer in community voice and community surveys, but we must honor what we get in, even if it's not what we like. We have to report on it accurately, and we have to recognize it, and we have to honor what people tell us. Otherwise, it's a sham to go to our community and ask for their feedback if we do not honestly give it the weighting that they've given us.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, it's very interesting because we've been told up to now that 90% of the people in Cullinan want subdivision. Now, I've looked at the 90-odd surveys here, and that's not the case. It's actually not the case. But I'll go quickly through it. I mean, the majority of people said exactly what they said last time. They liked our heritage, our rivers, and our local environment. That's why they choose to ignore it. That was consistent throughout all the 90. Then I went back and said, oh, I'll just see what people think about the rural zone. Now, 7 people who actually live in Cuddler actually said, I want subdivision. And actually, someone said 800 metres and someone said 1,500. 1,500 is I've found to be the figure that most talk about there. But 28 people specifically said they actually said they like the buffer zone, they like the green, they like all the way it is, the country feel, and there's endless different descriptions of what it's like to live in Gawler and because of the country zone. And in fact, that's about a third, 28 out of 90 odd, so about a third of people that we in this survey said they want the green zone. And interestingly, there was a percentage in that 28 that live in Cuddler who said that they want it as it is, and they just want some roads and stuff and some infrastructure. And that was it. So it's actually, what do you call it, false, I don't know, whatever it was just a thing, to actually say that 9% of false equivalency, that is actually a fallacy to say that 90% of the people in Tuggerah want subdivision. They don't. 90% of the people that put the survey in want it because potentially they got vested interest. So that's the false equivalency there. So, you know, really people need to look at the real data. This is our community plan. I've been talking about this community plan for years, and it comes out over and over and over again. And they're the issues that our whole community want. They love the rivers, they love all those things, and they love the green zone. And in the Pacific family actually want the green zone. So, you know, I think this is great. I think that hasn't come up in this report, but that's the data. That's what the data, that's what the survey says. You can go through and read those 90-odd surveys, and that's what they say. So I think it's good. I think it'll be a start. I think we'll probably have a big debate about lot sizes because from my memory and from everything that I hear, 1,500 square metres is what they want, and they've said it consistently, and that will give you Lindop out there. So I think when we go to when we go to it all, that's what we need to debate, the block sizes. Because things will have to happen, but that's what you know, that's the area that they're looking at. So yep, I think it's a good report. I love the surveys, some fantastic comments there, and yeah, let's move on. Thank you.
I'm going to talk about the community plan. I think the items that we're discussing are for future debates. I read the submissions and it was fantastic to see this sort of engagement. I guess what I'm bringing from it, and I'll be supportive of this direction, just to be clear, is we had all those submissions and it was really good to see. So I would love to know what was done different. How did we achieve that? What were our key points? Was it the publishing in the budget? Was it our Facebook posts? You know, those targeted that have drawn these people in to make their comments are very valid and very important in the direction setting of the town is I think very, very important to figure out how we captured that. That's what I would like to be able to see instead of just a list of where we posted it all. What were the major hit points was what I took out of this, and I look forward to the future community consultation and follow up through.
Thank you. I might ask David Barrett to take a question on notice and perhaps provide a response on those hit points and just prove if it's possible to address that. Perhaps not now, but I think we will get that answer for you, Councillor Shines. Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Hughes, you happy for me to put the motion? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? I'll just do that again. All those in favour of the motion? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on page 7, Gary. Happy to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Sandor. You've got a conflict.
Yeah. The conflict is the BMX Club. I'm the good sports ambassador for the Gawler BMX Club, so I've probably got to see conflict of interest. So I'll move on.
Thank you. Just note that in the minutes. Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Sandor. Do I have a seconder? Somebody put Councillor Ballawonga, you put your hand up. Mover, do you wish to speak at all?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I started up the Gawler BMX Club, so I don't know where I fit there, but that's a bloody long time ago. But the situation with all this, there's nothing in there to do with what we're going through at the moment, taking into consideration none of those clubs are active. Is there any comment from, I mean, are they paying the fee?
This is the lease.
Yeah, this is just the lease. No.
Renewal, it gives them longevity, the leases, doesn't it? You know, it keeps things going for them. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. There's no one.
Seconder, who was the seconder? Councillor Ballawonga, do you wish to speak? No,
for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. I think Councillor Tooley was before you. Councillor Tooley, then Councillor Shanks. Sorry, Councillor Shanks.
Yes, Mayor, I wonder if the motion is flawed in that it doesn't have a point 4, because it assumes, if you read point 3 says, should no objections be received, and it stops there. Should there not be a point 4 that says, if objections are received, it gives some direction as to what the CEO should do?
I think that's part of, now, Mr. Viney, is this your portfolio, public consultation on community land? It's Mr. Hall, being part of the board. So I think there's a process if there is objections, isn't there? I think there's a defined process.
Yes, through you, Mayor, the consistent approach we've taken is that if there are objections, it'd be a report back to council for consideration.
Yeah, I think that has to occur anyway, doesn't it? For community land, if there are objections under the Act.
I don't believe so, Mayor, hence why we've got number 3, but if there is objections, we would be reporting back to council.
Yeah. My recollection is that I think we're required to do that. I think that addresses your point, Councillor Tooley.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the answer. What happens if there are objections? So it says we're going to go out and do some surveying. We're going to consult. And it says if there's no objections, what we will do. What do we do if there is objections from those consultations?
It comes back to council for consideration if there's objections. It comes back to council if there are objections.
Well, why don't we write that in there as a point? Just add 4. It comes back to council if there are objections. Then it's not ambiguous, because if it's left like this and we support it, there's no record that we've said that. Let's put that dot point in.
Well, I'll put that to the mover and seconder. I was quite happy with what Mr. Hall said. Councillor Sample?
Yep, quite happy.
Are you happy to keep the motion the same or change it?
Oh, no, I do see the valid point that Councillor Tools mentioned, but I think also Mr. Hall would explain that to a sense that that would definitely be handled, but if it needs to be there, I'm happy for some wording to be there.
Okay, I'm not understanding. Are you wanting wording in there or not? You've got control of that, not Councillor Tooley. You have.
I think it explains itself, so leave it.
Okay, leave it as is.
It's got to come back to council.
Has to the mover and the seconder, so if one doesn't agree, yeah. So we're going to leave it. We're going to leave the motion as is. Councillor Tooley, you've already spoken. Do you wish to speak?
No, I only asked a question. I haven't spoken. I asked you a question about point 4. That's all I did. I have not.
I'll go to Councillor Shanks. I think you were next, and then if you wish to speak, Councillor Tooley, I'll go back to you.
I had a bit of a draft point 4, and picking up on that Councillor Samuel said, is just around, we can put a point 4 in there that the council directs the CEO to notify clubs of the criteria set for rate relief allocated by the COVID relief fund. The only reason, why I didn't speak why.
Well, these are about leases.
And those clubs, I'm just trying to.
It's about ground leases.
But I'm almost like trying to notify them, given the motion as well, but it might be too different here.
Keep speaking.
The only reason of this is just bringing some notification to these clubs and tying everything together around COVID relief. These sporting clubs signing into a new year lease for a 5-year term. My thinking around that is just sort of highlighting what we're offering in the COVID relief fund as well as part of it.
Okay, but I guess it may confuse the motion, and it might even confuse the clubs because this is actually about leases, and it might be more appropriate to have a separate motion, maybe a motion on those that could go as a separate to alert clubs about what council is doing. Make it cleaner, make it cleaner. I'll recommend you do that, maybe. I'll leave that up to you. Okay, Councillor Mitchell, your turn. You've got the floor.
I'd like to remind our elected members that we are decision makers, not the staff. We're responsible for that. And we're meant to make a resolution which is absolutely clear every time, unambiguous, that there can't be any loopholes or misunderstandings. And I've made the point through asking the question that we need to put a law that clearly says in there that if there is objection, the CEO consults, there is objections, it's a simple point 4, then this matter will come back before council. It's as simple as that. And I just cannot understand that you're willing to support a motion that is incomplete and inadequate and ambiguous and leaves itself open to be misused in the end. A simple 4 point. What is wrong with people? I bring up a sensible point and you put up barriers. Yeah, if it's coming from someone else's mouth, oh, lovely, wonderful. Yes, that makes good sense. Oh, councillor, you moved it. Would you like to put it on? What do I get? Block, block, block all the time. It's bloody ridiculous. And there's no way I'll vote for this with that ambiguous missing of point 4. It's just sheer arrogance that you're not adding point 4 on there. Just bloody mindedness.
Any other discussion? Councillor Sample, are you happy for me to put the motion?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against, it is carried. Thank you. Now, this is noting that the revocation of a couple of confidential orders. You have to move that way, Councillor Fraser. Second, Councillor Davies. Any movement? Any discussion? Second, any discussion? There be no discussion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands or click yes. All those against, please click no. It is carried unanimously. So that concludes the officers' report. We now move on to recommendations from committees, and I am looking at I'm on page 84, councillors. Yep. We have a recommendation from the CCS committee. Happy to move that way, Councillor Hughes. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser. Mover, do you wish to speak at all?
No.
Seconder, do you wish to speak? Any discussion? Oh, Mover, are you happy for me to put the motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand or click yes. All those against, please click no. It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to recommendations from the IES Committee, Infrastructure and Environmental Services Committee. I am on page 85. Motions made under delegated authority is that first one there. It's very straightforward. Moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Goldstone. All those in favour? All those against? All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Waterproofing, 7 is the recommendation. Looking for a mover. Was good discussion, great presentation. IES, we move that way, Councillor Little. Seconded by Councillor Fraser. Any discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving over the page. I am on page 87. First one is recommendation genetically modified crops. You happy to move that way, Councillor Fraser? Councillor Tooley, you happen to second? You've got your hand up? No? I'll look for a seconder. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak at all?
To say that I was reading, I don't know where I was reading it the other day, Australia's produce is noted for being not having GM. So overseas, if you start to do that, we'll lose a lot of our trade overseas. I don't know where I read it.
Councillor Hughes, as a seconder.
Just briefly, we did have quite a good discussion about this, and it's a chance for our community to give us feedback on this issue, and it'd be really interesting to see what Barossa and Playford sort of come up with as well, and whether as a group we work together. So it's certainly just the first step in getting some information from our community and working with our neighbours, which I think is good.
So the mover and seconder has spoken. Councillor Tooley.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Thank you. I spoke against this at length at the IES. I'll speak against it now. 3 reasons. Number one, in principle, I believe it was wrong that a single person came to the mayor and talked to her privately on this issue, and then it resulted in authorising an officer to be commissioned to spend time and money in preparing a report. When our usual practice is, we get asked, do we want to go in this direction? If we say yes, then we enact the work and time and money of the officers. So I think that process was clearly wrong. Secondly, the horse has bolted. This has been debated at length in South Australia. I don't agree with it, but it has bolted. It has the support of both major parties. It's not going to change. And the third thing, which I found quite outrageous, was the inaccuracies of the officer's report. The officer's report was written in a way to try to convince us as elected members that we should support the proposal. And it made false claims. It made claims in there that said there were many organic producers in Gawler that would be affected if GM products were to come in. And I asked the person who was speaking, Mr. Brookman, and he knew of no others. Nobody else knew of any others. There's only one organic producer, and that is the food forest. The report went on to also give the implication. It tried to imply, if you read it without really scratching into it, it tried to give the impression that another company called Winterlux was also somehow an organic producer that would be affected. And Winterlux are not an organic producer. So I find that's just outrageous that an officer's report can be written in a way which is not factually correct. And yet it becomes the basis on which we are meant to read and prepare for a motion. And we're supposed to take that as gospel and then vote, when in fact what we're presented with is inaccurate and wrong. And that just should not happen in a council meeting. And more of us should be more discerning to cut through that sort of thing to find and to get at the truth. So to spend a lot of time and money on this, which is going to be a flawed, failed exercise on the basis of one person in the community who claims they will be affected, that is the food forest, and we're putting our resources based on that, that is inequitable. And it's not the way that the process should run.
Any other discussion? Councillor Koch?
Thank you. I don't think the horse is bolted. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for our town and surrounding towns to be GM-free, because they're the smart, clever, innovative primary producers that we want in our community. That's what we want. This is the future. You can't grow enough organic food in the world at the moment. You can't. So we should be encouraging organic production in our town, a hub, a cluster. We shouldn't throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, it's all the horse is bolted, oh, worry me, gloom, gloom, gloom. You don't need that. You need to say, we need to think about embracing this opportunity to create an organic cluster to create smart, clever, well-paying jobs. So I'm in support of this because I want to see our farm production go in the right direction. I don't want to see it go backwards if we listen to some people. So I'm very keen to support this. I'm very keen to see the organic growing cluster grow in our community. And that's where we're going to get our smart, clever, well-paid jobs. So I am in full support of this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Fraser.
Yes, I've just remembered what I read. I just quickly thought about it, but it was to do with the canola growers at Roseworthy around that way, and they were saying that if people have GM, well then when the wind blows, you know, the GM travels to their plots, their land, and they were saying that they get good money overseas for their crops because they are GM free, and they don't want it. So that's local, really. I mean, I know it's not our council, but it's still local.
The debate's closed. Have you got a point of order, Councillor Tooley? The debate is closed. You have spoken. I don't know what you mean.
I have a question.
So the debate is closed. You've spoken
I have
on the debate. I close the debate. Sorry. No, Councillor Fraser has closed the debate. You had an opportunity to speak at length. I am now closing the debate. I'm putting the motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. All those against the motion. It is carried. Thank you. Are you calling a division, Councillor? Councillor Ballalonga has called a division. All those in favour of the motion, please stand or click yes, and I'll call you out. And we have Councillor Davies, Councillor Koch, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Little, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Shanks, and Councillor Fraser. All those against are Councillor Ballalonga, Councillor Samble. Councillor Tilley, you haven't voted. Hang on a minute, stay standing. You haven't voted. You've got a time out. You've now voted against. Okay. Thank you. So Councillor Tooley has voted against. If you can be included in against. This is division. The motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Councillor Tooley, you've got a time out. Is there a reason?
Yes, Mayor, it's a point of order. In a number of the debates tonight, you allowed, just the one just before this, you allowed several questions before and after speakers by Councillor Shanks. I asked a question simply because as Councillor Fraser was closing, she made a point that prompted a question. And that's why I raised my hand to ask a question and you refused to allow it.
With all due respect, so I'm not upholding that point of order. She was closing. Councillor Fraser.
I didn't expect you would, Mayor. I never expect you to uphold a point of order from me. You never do. It's not to be expected. But I'll make the point of orders anyway, and the record can show that you missed a point of order and you knock me back again.
I won't be upholding your point of order because the debate is closed. Thank you. Right, now that concludes that matter. We move now on to landscape irrigation maintenance plan. There is a recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Sandel.
I've got an issue with this one. Could I talk through?
No, we'll get a mover and second first, and then I'll address your question if that's a question. You moved. Do I have a second, Councillor Fraser? Do you wish to speak, mover, at all?
Only that it's an excellent report. It's the way we've got to go. This is a who put this report together has certainly done their homework, and certainly it's again more money, and so I'm not over. I don't think we should rush it, but certainly taking away the meters and things like that, saving, and eventually we're going to come out in front because it'll keep it clean and green, and it'll still be the best town in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak? Okay. So I'll address you and then I'll go to Councillor Tully. Thank you, Councillor Koch.
Look, I've got a concern with this one. I'm happy with the majority of it, but I'm not happy with us agreeing to change the categories from category 4 to 3 and 4, the number of parks, in particular, Oleana Waters and Primary Park. Just as some background, the irrigation system at Oleana Waters is 77% inefficient. That's what the report says. Putting on 70% more water than we should. And it was said that it was a poor installation by developers, and now we're going to go through and just up the rate. It just sounds like to me we're doing that, so it's an accounting trick. I'm also concerned about Aspire, because their irrigation system is poor. So it's 24% inefficient, putting on 24% more irrigation than we should. I'm also concerned by one of the comments that Mr. Gerard Charlton made. He said that in the report, it actually says that this has already happened. Somebody's made a decision and we're already irrigating at this level already. So we've already moved from category 4 to category 3. And don't worry about it because it's already in the budget. Now, I'm concerned that somebody has unilaterally decided to change categories. And when I read the report, it says, oh, we need to leave it this because that way we won't get any complaints. Now, that goes back to, so my concern is the template for changing categories, anything in our town, to just put in a lot of complaints and harass people till somebody on the ground, somebody said, oh yes, and then down the track, we will just decide, the council decide because it's already been done. Now, I'm not happy at all to even go on with this, this motion. I'm happy with some, but just that bit. So I'm actually going to talk about section 18 of the regulations, and that's to do with providing information. Now, I would like to get information from the officers about how this decision was made. So any written reports, emails, etc., how this decision was made. Because I'm very concerned that we're making decisions that aren't transparent and aren't equitable. That we're just making decisions.
So your section 18.
Yes.
Can I just begin with the regulations, the regulations?
It's still tabling information.
Thank you. Do these documents exist?
I hope so, because if a decision like this has been made without any documentation, that's a bigger issue for me.
Okay. So you're quoting, so just for clarity,
yes,
you're quoting section 18 of the Local Government Procedures and Meetings Regulations 2013, section 18.
Yep.
And in here, you're stating you want what documents exactly?
I'd like to see the emails, I'd like to see what reports have been written, I'd like to see what conversations we've had. I just can't believe that a decision has been made to go from a category 4, category 3 without any documentation. I didn't have it on the ground.
I'm trying to clarify, Councillor Koch, that these documents that you're asking for actually exist, so they do.
There have to be CRMs, there have to be emails, there have to be some paper trail. Because something like this doesn't happen just out of thin air.
Just for clarity, you're wanting that in relation to the changing of the classification.
How was that decision made? There must have been documentation in somewhere that initiated this decision to go from category 4 to category 3.
And are you saying that you're unwilling to vote?
I'm unwilling to vote until I get that information. Just on that section. I have all the other bits, it's just that section.
And in this members' clarification, section 18 states that then the matter must not be put to the vote until the documents are tabled. So CEO, given that you raised this, the matter, do we have a formal motion to put it, do we just not proceed? Because this effectively, that is unwilling to vote on the motion until the documents are tabled, the matter must not be put to the vote until the documents are tabled.
Yeah, I'm happy to, I'm happy, the only thing I'm not happy with is 7, I think. And
Well, we've got two options. You've identified is that you don't wish to, you will not vote until you receive these documents, to clarify that. So that's one option. We can't proceed. And I'm asking what that process is. Do we just stop?
Well, through the chair, if I could, I was actually going to suggest that the Councillor Fraser's comment that rather than defer, seem to apply that part of the regulations. Because I would suggest that the nature of the volume of information that's presented provides enough for council to make a decision, and wouldn't necessarily require going into the level of detail that council cost is suggesting in terms of email exchange between officers and management and so on and so forth. And I would suggest that council, rather than going down that path, that effectively passing the resolution and in respect to part 7, that actually defers the reclassification of the following reserves, and that trigger will provide further information to council.
that would be the same, that's the same outcome.
That's a potential way forward. But the mover and the seconder, I can't see the mover and the seconder. Okay, we've got Councillor Sample and Councillor Fraser. Are you happy for CEO, you're talking about point 7? So the reclassification of the following reserves, blah, 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 be deferred. Okay, can we get that wording? And Mover, are you happy with that?
Well, I'm happy, Councillor Fraser, I'm happy with it.
Okay, so the mover and seconder are happy. That's point 7 defers the reclassification of the following reserves in accordance with current irrigation application to support expect. So I would suggest you take that out. Defers the reclassification of the following. Reserves from 2 quality visual standards 4 to 3 at the of the following reserves from 4 to 3 full stop, and then you've got the list of the following reserves. So you take out the extra text, Chris. Yes. Well, that's what that says, defer. So I don't know if you actually have to say, well, it will come back. It will have to come back. But the mover and the key thing is that the mover and second happy with those wording based on that.
Yes, but I'd also expect it to come back to the next meeting or something. I mean, it's something that just can't be laid out because the staff, they've got their plan working at a particular moment, even though it's something that's not.
Okay. All right. I'm sure the staff will bring it back in a timely way. I think that would not fair. Okay, so you're happy to vote on that?
Yeah, I'm happy now. Yeah.
No, but just, we don't have to enact section 18?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we've sorted that out. All right. That's something that comes off. Okay. Any, Councillor Tully, you've got your hand up.
Members, I hope you've just witnessed exactly what I'm talking about. I asked that we move an amendment to item 1111 to add a single point 4 about what do we do if the consultations don't go well. The Mayor made my life difficult. You wouldn't support it. I have just witnessed Councillor Koch going on and on. I've witnessed the Mayor facilitating his wording. I've witnessed the Mayor coming back to the mover and seconder, helping them and asking them if they'll change it, to change that point 7. Can you not see the inconsistencies and the discrimination? And I do not agree with point 7 being changed. We debated this quite significantly. We had expensive consultants.
Mover and seconder do support it and previously. With due respect, Councillor Tooley, unless you have a wish to speak either for or against the motion, I'll ask for other.
I am speaking against the motion, Mayor.
You can stick to you and not be abusive. That would be helpful. Thank you.
If you please stop interrupting me, I will finish speaking against the motion. We had a long debate at the IES. We had expensive consultants speaking to us. At no point during that debate did Councillor Koch raise any of these issues. If he had, we had the actual consultants there to speak with it. When we talked about this motion and we included point 7, we covered a whole load of questions. There were some significant questions that I asked. One was that we were protecting the already existing open spaces, that we would not be degrading them or retrofitting them in a way that didn't meet their original design and We got assurances that we were supporting the irrigation of green spaces. We got understandings that we valued green spaces that reduce heat sinks in the town. We had an extensive debate, and it included those, the points that were listed in point 7. Councillor Koch did not raise them on the night. Councillor Koch has had ample time to raise those issues, and I am just disgusted at the way that you, Mayor Redman, and Councillor Koch, and you facilitated this to make this change, when in item 11 before that, a simple change that I asked, you blocked. And it proves my point, and I'm glad this is being streamed because it's on the record. You treat me differently and you discriminate. You facilitate the actions of some
talking about the issue.
and you block me as an elected member. And it is just discrimination there.
Any other discussion? Councillor Koch?
I just want to clarify a couple of things.
Are you asking a question?
No, I'm going to speak to this. I actually did ask questions, and I actually sent a whole lot of questions into Mr. Delena before the meeting. I haven't had a detailed response to that, so that's another thing. But Mr. Jerry Sharp actually said at that meeting that he felt that council officers should have the discretion to change the categories and reserves at response to community expectations. I don't agree to that. I don't agree with that premise that council officers have the right to change the category. So I actually asked about that, and I actually said at the meeting, well, it'll come up to this meeting and we'll debate it. I actually said that. So my concern really revolves around this decision-making process, where we go from one category to another one without any consultation with us. And I don't think it's very transparent or it's very equitable. In particular, we're having a debate, we're having a community consultation about CRMs and community expectations, the community service. And I was told that CRMs will not be driving our service levels. To me, this would look like it. This looks like CRMs driving our service levels. That's the sort of thing, that's what I think. So I just want to make sure that that's not happening. The other thing is, previous tonight, when I stepped out, this council actually talked about the fees.
So I think we've got a point of order. Is that correct, Councillor Tooley? You have a point of order?
Yes, Mayor, I have had a point of order up for quite a long time. Why are you allowing Councillor Koch a second time to speak? He wasn't given leave of the meeting to speak a second time, and yet you've invited him to speak. He's already spoken at length. Why are you giving him an opportunity to speak a second time against the rules and regulations?
You allow me to speak instead of cutting me off consistently. Councillor Koch was actually talking about section 18, which is quite a different matter. And so he is now speaking. So I think that clarifies that.
No.
I'll finish up what I was saying. What happened previously was that we didn't have any scheduled fees for Council 1 facilities. So it was all over the shop. And what tended to happen was that people would talk to officers and they'd come to an agreement. And that's recorded. And we decided we really need to change that and have the schedule of fees, and it's exactly what, and everybody knows what it is, and everyone's happy, and that's it. You get into the category you're in, and that's it. Now, when I look at this, it looks like we've got our category. We took some time to get this category all into place. Many years ago, we didn't have it. We've got it all in place, and now it's not working because people are saying, "Well, I want something else," and they just talk officers and talk to officers and talk to officers. So the template is you just keep badgering people and you get what you want. So that's what I want to look at. That's what I'm concerned about. Whether that's, and I just want to see how it works, what the trend, whether it's transparent, whether it's equitable, etc., etc. And so that's why I'm happy with this new motion, and I'm happy to vote for it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Goldstein.
Can you just see point 7 up there? Yeah. So we're still which is my concern because I think it's an important point, this point 7. I understand what Councillor Kosh is saying, but it's all about maintaining standards and I have respect for my community. So I don't want it to disappear or, drag on for 6 months. So just, as long as it comes back timely.
Any other discussion? Councillor, who was it there? Councillor Smith. Are you happy for me to put the motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. So that, now we move on to, I think we've got room for one more motion. Highway service. Councillor Tooley. Councillor Tooley, yes?
Mayor, you've got to keep your eye on me, please. I want to call a division on that last decision, please.
Okay, no problem.
Missing out on questions and divisions because you're not watching. Please watch. I want a division on that.
I am trying to watch it. I've got multiple amount of people who I am trying to keep an eye on, so I think I'm doing pretty well. But thank you for the feedback. Thank you. So Councillor Tooley has called a division on that motion. All those in favour, please stand. And I'll call your name out. Councillor Davies, Councillor Kosh, Councillor Little, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Samble, Councillor Shanks, Councillor Fraser. All those against Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Ballalonger. Stay standing, please, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Samble. All those against are Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Ballalonger, and Councillor Tooley. The motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you happy to move this motion? Thank you, Councillor Davies. Do I have a second? Councillor Goldstein, do you wish to speak? Do you wish to speak? Any discussion? Councillor Tooley.
Yes, we had a very good discussion at the committee regarding this item. I think what we've seen is the uptake has been moderate and well within the budget, but with increased promotion and with the options that we're providing for our community. And if we are to advertise this a little bit better than perhaps we have the potential to increase that uptake. It won't in any way blow its budget, but it's certainly providing a very good service. And for those people that need the people to call to their homes because they don't have trailers or they don't have the capacity, then they're being able to take up that option, which is really good for our community members. Others who do have a trailer, they're able to take up the voucher system. And whilst Eco Waste, it appears in the report, might be a little bit more expensive, the good thing is that we're again supporting an innovative local business that is doing an extremely good job. And so I'm pleased that in this resolution, we're recognising that and that we are continuing to consolidate what I think is a very good service for our community.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Davies, you happy for me to put the motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand or click yes. It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, we've only got 5 minutes to go, and I don't think we're going to get through anything else.
Happy to move the next motion.
You happy to move the next motion? I beg your pardon?
Then we move 16.4 forward.
16.4, or or yours? 16.4? Okay. You reading that one? Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Shanks. All those in favour that we move the matter forward? I can't see hands, I'm sorry. Can you put your hands up? Thank you very much. If you can keep your hands up so I can just, sorry, it's a bit late. All those against? Now, we are voting to move the matter forward, which is 16.4, so we can deal with your motion. That's what we're asking to do. So I'll do that again. Moved by Councillor Davies, seconded by Councillor Shanks. All those in favour that we move the matter forward, which is 16.4. All those against? Okay, I need everybody to vote. So I'll just explain that again. We are moving the matter forward. We are moving 16.4 forward, so we will discuss 16.4. But the motion is that we move it forward. So I'll do that again. All those in favour, please make it very clear to me that you are in favour. If you can click yes, Ian, that would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Now, Councillor Tooley, you can present your motion, which is 16.4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Davies, for moving this forward. I am surprised because I know that Councillor Davies has a similar motion. Perhaps he's done it because his motion was very, very similar to this one, but this one perhaps avoids the need for a report because we're simply saying that we value the live streaming. We've got the equipment, the facilities. It's not expensive. We've been doing it. And I believe it's a really, really good thing that we're doing. A lot of the people in the community are watching it. The other thing is it's a very accurate record because to give you an example, thinking back on what Councillor Hughes said about the agenda and the meeting from the 3rd of June, I have now, since we've been sitting here, looked at those minutes, and the minutes that are recorded are actually quite inaccurate. And what is listed on there, and I can understand Councillor Hughes's confusion, is that what's been recorded is not what happened. And so I'm going to ask Kate Symes to go back to the video and to actually record from the video and to update and correct those minutes because the minute record is accurate. And
So I think it's done and dusted. If you can focus on the matter at hand here, that would be good.
yeah, okay. Look, you need to understand that when I speak, and a lot of other people do, we give illustrations to illustrate the point. And what I've just illustrated is relevant to why this is a good motion, because by us having the Facebook and the YouTube stream, we're allowing people to participate more actively. They don't have to come out of their houses. They can stream it, but also they can watch it at any time they like. And I am really pleased that the record is accurate because I've been misquoted many, many times and haven't had the ability to go back to the recording. I've had to rely on the recordings of the Bunyip or the Advertiser. Thank the Lord that they've had them because they've clarified the points. But this puts on the record exactly what is said, how and when, and there can be no misunderstanding. So for all those reasons, I hope people support this.
Happy to second it, Councillor Davies. Wish to speak? We have 1 minute left.
1 minute, so I'll just say, the reason I pushed this motion forward is more up-to-date version. Mine was a month old, asked for a report, but clearly we've already got live streaming set up, so I'm just asking for us to officially approve it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? So Councillor Tooley, we have 1 minute left. Any other discussion, Councillor Goldstone?
I just wondered, do we have any stats of how many people actually do it?
My husband takes stats. I know exactly. It's dropping. I won't, I'll take that on notice because we will run out of time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Any other discussions?
Just a comment. As hopefully bring this motion up at the hearing. But I don't know if that's it.
Okay, look, it is now 11 o'clock, and I'm going to ask Councillor Tooley to close the debate so we can put this motion, otherwise we won't even get to do that. Councillor Tooley, can you please close the debate? Are you happy for me to put that motion? Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. We now close the meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So the meeting, we do have some adjourned items. The meeting is closed. We'll have to deal with those adjourned items at the beginning of our next meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
What was you with